Chapter 315. Xiaorou stared at the embarrassed robot. She had a feeling that this robot was different from all the robots she had seen in her life. Perhaps the robots she had seen were more perfect and elegant in appearance, but this robot gave her a very strange feeling. How should she put it? Aside from the fact that it looked like a robot, it seemed to possess a human soul. If it weren't for its mechanical body, Xiaorou would have mistaken it for a shy and reserved child who had come to visit a stranger's house. However, just like Sillin, Xiaorou's expression changed when she saw the gifts Moon handed her. If she wasn't mistaken, these so-called gifts were the master's gifts that they saw the mutants showing off in the train carriage on their way back. Those mutants were definitely not good people. They were born in the gray world of the civilian district and worked for the slave masters in the city cluster. They had to be powerful people. Not to mention, among the gifts was the gemstone that many people in the train coveted. The owner of the gemstone was not easy to deal with. It would take a long time to deal with those people. How did this robot do it? Tang didn't know much about these things. Before he could recover from the shock of Huimao and Sillin, this robot that was clearly different from the others gave him these gifts. Tang's hands were shaking like they were cramping. He waved his hands and shook his head. It's okay. These are too expensive. There's no need for gifts. Moon shoved the gemstones, bracelets, and rings into Tang's hand and performed an ancient greeting. It was an etiquette from 1,000 years ago. It was a little different from modern etiquette, but those who didn't know anything about etiquette wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Tang didn't know how to react. His palms were sweaty, and his nose was bleeding again. He coughed a few times. As his physical condition worsened, Tang's agitated emotions could easily trigger a series of symptoms. Bleeding and coughing weren't the main problem. In severe cases, he would fall into a deep coma for several days. Xiaorou quickly brought a bottle of liquid medicine to Tang. Only after he drank 2 mouthfuls did Tang calm down. Eat this. Sillin tossed a small bottle of medicine over. This medicine was much better than the one Tang was taking. Originally, Sillin was going to give it to Tang and the others after they were taken away for treatment. After all, they had just met, and the other party would definitely be on guard. However, seeing Tang's reaction after knowing his and Huimao's identity, there was no need to worry about that. Tang didn't care about the gifts in his hands. He placed them on the table and took the medicine bottle from Sillin with trembling hands. Then he drank the water Xiaorou gave him without any hesitation. Not to mention taking medicine. Even if Sillin asked Tang to pack up and leave right now, Tang wouldn't say a word. In fact, even Sillin himself did not know that his name had unknowingly become the religion of many people, such as Tang. Sillin wasn't the best academician in the entire Mist Bodhisattva Empire, nor was he the most authoritative person in the world of academia. However, he was definitely one of the most influential people in the entire empire. There weren't many people in the world who didn't know Sillin's name by now. The younger generation, the lower generation, was also going to rise to power in the near future. A famous historian of the Mist Bodhisattva Empire once said in an influential magazine that Sillin would play an important role in the history of academia. He was the person who would lead the academic world to a turning point. However, at this moment, the man who played an important role in the turning point of history was covering his face with his hands. He was speechless at the shy Ayu who was introducing himself to Tang and Xiaorou. As expected, Ayu was a troublemaker. After the introduction, Ayu tilted his head and looked at Tang and Xiaorou. Will you be leaving with us? Tang looked carefully at Sillin and saw that Sillin was looking at them. He sucked in a deep breath and said in a trembling voice, I'm listening to your arrangements. Just call me Sillin. Sillin suddenly turned to look at Ayu. You're in trouble this time, you. Ayu scanned the area with his scanner before looking down and twirling his fingers. I'm really sorry. Sillin curled his lips. Sorry my ass. Keep pretending. Huimao had just finished arguing with a couple of old guys in the forum and logged out of the forum. He was about to greet Ayu when his ears suddenly pricked up and his mouth cracked into a smile. He jumped onto Sillin's shoulder and said, Are we going to fight this time? Xiaorou was confused by their reaction at first, but her eyes suddenly focused and she said to Tang, Big bro, you go inside first. What's wrong? Tang looked confused, but he quickly went back to his room and grabbed a couple of modified guns. It's fine, I'll stay with you. On the simple scanning screen made by Tang, there were many dots of light surrounding their house. Each dot of light represented a person. In other words, they were surrounded. The most obvious difference between the civilian area and Old Man Chang's was that the civilian area here was filled with violence and blood. The strong preyed on the weak in this lawless place was the law of the jungle. There were no weaklings here. Even a sickly person like Tang was not a weakling that everyone could bully. He had taken human lives, but he was nowhere near as good as Tang handed the gun barrel to and said to Silin, "You can hide in the house for now. There's an energy shield over there. You can activate it after you get inside." Tang only had one energy stone in his possession, and he had always been reluctant to use it as an emergency measure. However, he couldn't care less about it right now. Opened her mouth. She wanted to tell her big brother that this person was much more powerful than the two of them combined. In the end, she held herself back. In the eyes of the public, how powerful could an academic be? Generally, scholars would be accompanied by a large number of guards when they went out. Therefore, no one thought that an academic could be powerful. If Guanfeng was a special case in the academic world, then Silin was the special case among special cases. In Tuosen's words, Silin was a freak. Silin rose to his feet and stopped Tang from leaving the room. "Since we're the ones who caused this, we'll take care of it. You two just decided to leave with us, so there's no need for you two to show up." After saying this, Silin looked at Yu, who was twirling his fingers. "You, let's go take care of the rest." "Oh." Yu followed Silin out the door with his head hung low. Huimao was already moving its claws around excitedly. Outside Tang's house, a group of unruly-looking mutants surrounded it. They had weapons in their hands, including machetes and guns. One of them was the man Yu had knocked out. Yu had taken advantage of the situation at the time, but he was found out later. That was why he gathered a group of people to stop them. "That's the robot. I saw it run off with your stuff." One of the Inhumans pointed at Moon, who had followed Celine out of the room. The blue light on Yu's face narrowed into a thin line. He looked at the person who had spoken. He didn't remember seeing this person around him. The man's eyes flickered when he saw Yu looking at him. He felt a little guilty. His information should be correct, right? Silin had already told Yu to explain the situation to him before he walked out of the room. After listening to the story, Silin didn't say anything. He simply looked at the crowd. Tang didn't hide in his room. He walked out with and his gun. Due to his long illness, he looked a lot thinner than the people outside. "Yo, the sickly invalid is out?" Someone sneered. Charo's eyes turned cold. Her silver snake knife was already in her hand. If she had to fight later, the first person she would kill would be this person. "What are you guys trying to do?" Tang raised his gun and stood in front of Silin. Charo stood close to Tang and looked at Silin. She relaxed a little when she saw Silin's calm demeanor. This person was much stronger than she thought. "What are we trying to do?" "Hee, we'll have to ask it. Does it think it can get out of here alive after stealing our stuff?" "Oh wait, I forgot it's a robot. It doesn't have to live or die," one of the aliens yelled. He raised the machete in his hand and pointed the tip of the machete in Celine's direction in a show of force. Tang was about to ask what it was, but Charo nudged him with her elbow. She didn't want him to ask. Silin took 2 steps forward. The moment he moved, Tang tensed up. He couldn't let this person get hurt here. Otherwise, Tang would feel like a sinner in the academic world. Some of the people in the circle were already pointing their guns at Silin. If Silin made a move, they would open fire. Pushing aside Tang, who was blocking his way nervously, Silin bent down and reached a hand to the ground. There was a metal plate buried into the ground, and only a small part of its edge was visible. Tang and Charo had tried to flatten the area as much as possible because they couldn't pull out the metal plate that was buried deep into the ground. But now Silin stretched out his hand and easily poked his fingers into the sturdy ground. He grabbed the metal plate, raised his arm and pulled. Tang watched as Silin easily pulled out the metal plate that he and Sha Rou couldn't even pull out with their combined strength. The metal plate was 7 or 8 centimeters thick, nearly 1 meter wide, and more than 7 meters long. Moreover, its density and hardness were relatively high. This kind of metal was not very valuable. It could be seen in many places in the civilian area. Most of them were buried in the ground as a foundation, so everyone knew very well how difficult it was to pull this metal plate out. However, this seemingly useless young man pulled it out with one hand without panting. It was as easy as pulling a carrot. This was only the beginning. Silin pulled the metal plate out and looked at it. Then he placed both hands on the metal plate and folded it into a simple stool. This series of actions made everyone's eyelids twitch. Tang and Sha Rou's hands trembled. They suddenly felt very weak. Silin swept the dust off the stool and sat down calmly. He crossed his legs and placed his fingers on his knees. Are you going to apologize? You heard Silin's words, but his head was still lowered. He clenched his fists tightly. He looked very nervous. Tang couldn't bear to see him like this. Sha Rou liked this weird little robot, but she knew that a person who could steal something from those people was no ordinary person. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Yu inched closer to the encirclement and said timidly, "All right, I sincerely apologize." As soon as he finished speaking, an arc of white light shot toward the ground. 2 steps away from the encirclement formed by these ill-intentioned mutants, there was a deep arc-shaped depression on the ground. Moreover, the depression was still emitting smoke. The soil and metal buried there were instantly burned into smoke. A timid and slightly innocent voice asked again, Do you accept my apology?" Everyone. Accept? How could they not? What the fuck, you even took out a weapon like this. What can we say? If this kind of attack was used on a human, not even their bones would be left. The faces of the people who were holding their knives and guns just a moment ago twisted. If Silin's action earlier was only enough to make their eyelids twitch, then Yu's behavior right now was enough to make their livers twitch. Tang's jaw almost dropped to the ground. As expected, Silin's pets and robots were different from everyone else's. No one dared to say anything. Some of the people who had formed the encirclement already planned to retreat. They had nothing better to do, so they came to have some fun. Who would want to risk their lives against these people? It was obvious what kind of equipment they had. Going up against them would be suicide. They wouldn't do something so stupid. Then, what kind of explanation do you want for this? If you want it, I'll give it to you. You said innocently. No one answered. What kind of explanation? Who would dare? Perhaps the next explanation would cost them their lives. You looked around. Some people's legs trembled when they saw the mechanical face with the blue stripes. They couldn't help but back away. We can't retreat. Someone in the encirclement suddenly shouted. It was the person who pointed out Yu. He avoided everyone's eyes when they looked at him, but he still stubbornly said, "Don't be afraid of them. My boss will be here soon. You'll get what you deserve." Yu looked at the person and asked, "Who's your boss?" "My boss is blood splattered." The person was cut in half at the waist. Useless. A person with a water pattern tattoo on his face appeared behind the person. Blood dripped from the blade in his hand, but it didn't leave any marks. The people who had been running away retreated when they saw this person. Some started to run, but they only got a few steps before blood splattered everywhere. People appeared one after another. They were all wearing cloaking devices that could make them invisible. Those people didn't see anyone when they ran, so they didn't even see the person who wanted to kill them. They're from Myriad Seas City. Sha Rou recognized one of them. He was one of the most powerful assassins in the city. The people who had come before were more or less the same, and they knew each other's strength. However, these were assassins from Myriad Seas City who had come prepared. Even Sha Rou had no chance of winning against any of them. Sha Rou's face turned as white as a sheet when she saw these people. In the past, these people were only after money. But now these people were executioners. Sha Rou didn't even have the courage to take a single step forward. Her legs felt like they were frozen in place. "I'm sorry," Sha Rou said in a low voice. She was talking to Tang and Silin. She must have killed the 3 people from Myriad Seas City that attracted the attention of these people. She didn't expect them to send out such powerful assassins. Could it be that the 3 people in Myriad Seas City were much more important than what Parker said? They're not here for you, Sillin said. Their target is me. You? Xiaoro looked at Sillin in confusion. Because they're the ones who've been watching you. Xiaoro and Shurtang felt a chill run down their spines. Had these people been watching them all this time? Clap, 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 clap. Applause rang out. A figure appeared on the stage. It was just an image projected by the projector. This person must be watching them from somewhere. The person in the image looked a little frail. If it weren't for the twisted smile on his face, he might even look like a scholar. As expected of one of the top 5 most influential people in the world of academia. It's a pleasure to meet you, Sillin, the person said. Sillin glanced at him, but didn't say anything. The person wasn't angry at Sillin's silent response. He continued. If I didn't happen to have some free time today, I wouldn't have noticed that an honorary scholar of the Royal Academy of Sciences would show up in a small place like this. You've been watching us? Shurtang asked. Shurtang was having a hard time holding back this question. Shurtang's first impression of the person in the image was disgust. I've been watching you? You're not worthy. It's just that one of my subordinates discovered your talent by accident, so I secretly helped you out. But from the looks of it, you didn't even get the final results. It sounded like his subordinates saw a stray dog on the side of the road, and threw a few leftover bones at it from time to time. Shurtang trembled in anger. It had to be said that the person's help did help Shurtang's research to a certain extent. It wasn't much, but it did save him a lot of time searching for the necessary ingredients. That drug did prolong his life a little too. However, Shurtang and his sister weren't slaves, nor were they livestock. The way the person spoke and looked at them made Shurtang want to beat the crap out of him. Celine was still sitting in the same posture as before. She said in a calm tone. It seems that you are also a member of the academic world. Your secret charity is just for Shurtang's research. Moreover, although Shurtang did not completely succeed in obtaining the results, didn't you steal some of the research results at some stages? So in reality, he doesn't owe you anything. Shurtang abruptly turned to look at the person in the video. His research was stolen by someone else a long time ago? He had been working hard all this time for these people. His illness was also for these people. He had been fantasizing about selling his research to the people in the research department, even if he couldn't get the final results. That way, his sister could live a better life after his death. But it was all just a fantasy. These people wouldn't allow him to do that. When he couldn't hold on any longer, Xiaoro would be killed as well, and the research department would use someone else's name. If they didn't care about him, why did they have to take away his last hope? Why? Why are you? Shurtang was gradually losing control of his emotions. Other than his sister, the thing he valued the most was his research. For a researcher like him, his research was like his own child. Even if he had to trade his health and lifespan for it, Shurtang was willing to do so. However, what right did these people have to deprive him of this little bit of hope and wealth? The world had never been fair. Shurtang and his sister, who lived in this violent and bloody civilian area, knew this very well. But Shurtang couldn't accept this. He couldn't accept this. Shurtang thought back to when he first started browsing the forums, and the people there had posted the extremely controversial words in Sillin's report. This world is strange when it comes to giving rewards. It tends to give rewards to those who are already famous. The background of honor leads to the uneven distribution of honor results. This unfair effect caused many unknown researchers to not be recognized by the academic community for a period of time, or for a long period of time after they made contributions and had good results. Some outstanding people even quit the academic community. There is a phenomenon in the academic community of the empire. Those who already have a lot want to give them more. They would rather let them have more. And those who are already short on money want to take away even the last straw in their hands. So this was all true. Shurtang's mind replayed the words, and every single one of them made him feel suffocated. His violent emotions made him cough again. Blood flowed out of his nostrils. Xiaoro couldn't care less about the people outside. She hurriedly went into the house to fetch some medicine for Shurtang to drink. Sillin looked at Shurtang and injected him with a syringe. The medicine wouldn't be effective immediately under the influence of his emotions, so he had to inject the medicine first. Shurtang's condition improved after the injection. Sillin asked Xiaorou to take care of him while he turned around to look at the person in the video who was looking at them with a sneer. Are you not going to let me go as well? You don't plan to let me go in the first place, do you? The person in the video raised his chin. That's right. Why do you, Sillin, deserve so much attention? It's just because you have a good mentor that you can fool those lowly commoners. Do you really think you're some big shot? In my eyes, you're just an ant that doesn't know who you are. Is that so? Sillin snapped his fingers. Puff, puff. Sounds came one after another. Some people appeared in the originally empty place. These people were the assassins of Myriad Sea's city who had yet to reveal themselves. The Poochie sound came from these people. Their cloaking gear was broken, so they revealed themselves one after another. However, they were already dead by the time they showed themselves. Under the astonished gaze of the man in the video, the subordinates he sent, whether invisible or not, fell one after another. However, they couldn't detect the people who were hiding even deeper than they were. Chapter 316. The man in the video was stunned by the sudden turn of events, but he also understood that an honorary scholar of the RES like Sillin must have brought along hidden guards. After these people died one after another, he contacted another group of people and informed the planetary government that they wouldn't interfere with Myriad Sea City's actions. Sillin didn't stop him from contacting the planetary government. Through this channel, Sillin could learn more about the man in the video. The reason Huimao hadn't done anything until now was because Sillin had asked it to pay attention to all parties' communications and steal their information to investigate the man's identity. The results surprised Sillin a lot. No wonder this man dared to attack an honorary scholar of the RES. Given their backgrounds, it would be very difficult for anyone to find out who they were as long as they took care of the matter cleanly. Unfortunately, Sillin wasn't someone he could deal with casually. Gleason Vanet, so you're a member of the Gleason family. No wonder you're so confident. Sillin smiled. Vanet stared at the man in front of him who was slightly younger than him. How could he smile so calmly if he knew that he was a member of the Gleason family? Or was he just pretending to be calm? But if Sillin could find out who he was, then he must be able to contact the RES as well. This was going to make things difficult for him. Although the Gleason family was powerful, they wouldn't go against the RES directly. It would be detrimental to their interests. Vanet smiled after thinking about it for a moment. He couldn't start a conflict with the RES directly, but he could attack from another side. As expected of Guanfeng's student. You may have Guanfeng's support, but these two people are residents of this planet. You, Sillin, can't do anything about it? Oh, I forgot to mention that the Gleason family has jurisdiction over this planet. This is a legitimate cooperation between us and the planetary government. Not even Guanfeng can interfere. Vanet's meaning was simple. You can leave if you want, but you can't take these two people with you. He wanted to embarrass Sillin and make Sillin lose face. If Sillin continued to argue about the ownership of these two people, Vanet was prepared to produce the relevant documents and settle the dispute through legal means. But after hearing Vanet's words, Sillin didn't say anything and even ignored Vanet. While they were talking, Sillin's spaceplane had flown over on its own. Earlier, when Xiaorou was feeding Shurtang his medicine, Sillin had already signaled them to pack their things and leave at a moment's notice. Therefore, after the spaceplane landed, Sillin immediately boarded the spaceplane with Xiaorou and Shurtang. He completely ignored Vanet, who was talking to himself. The people from Thousand Seas City had already arrived after receiving Vanite's order. However, there seemed to be a transparent energy barrier in front of them. And there were also hidden people who were creating obstacles for them. When they finally rushed to the front of the low house, the aircraft had already flown away. The people in charge of intercepting in the air could not hold on at all. The control buttons were inexplicably malfunctioning, and they could not lock onto the target. Moreover, the defense network on the periphery of the planet was also frequently malfunctioning. When everything was finally restored, There was not even a trace of the aircraft. Bang! Inside a research base on a certain planet, Vanet was so angry that he smashed the screen in front of him. The glance Sillin gave him before he left made Vanet feel like Sillin was mocking and looking down on him. Boss. A guard wearing the Gleason family emblem opened the door and walked in. What is it? Vanet roared without looking back. Vanet was furious right now, and he was contacting some people to cause trouble for Sillin. It would be best if they could destroy the spaceplane without anyone noticing. So what if Guanfeng was Guanfeng? He couldn't possibly go against the great Gleason family, could he? There was no way the Royal Academy of Sciences would pursue this matter too deeply, just for a mere Sillin. Young master is here. The guard who was calm a moment ago bit his tongue uncontrollably when he said this name. Vanet's hand paused for a moment. When he finally realized what this young master meant, his anger was replaced by a wave of anxiety. No one would be able to help but be afraid of that person. Vanet hurriedly put away his communicator and straightened his lab coat. He adjusted his expression and forced a smile as he walked out to greet the young master. Although he had already adjusted his expression, when he saw the person striding over from the other side of the tunnel, Vanet's face still stiffened. When he looked into that person's eyes, Vanet felt like he had been thrown into a glacier. The person was obviously shorter than him, but Vanet felt like he was the one being looked down upon. Why are you here? Before Vanet could finish, he was slapped in the face. He staggered a step back, and before he could stand up, another slap came. The two slaps directly slapped Vanet to the ground. Half of his face was already swollen, and a few of his teeth were broken. His mouth was full of blood. The person who slapped him stood in front of Vanet, looking down at Vanet, who was struggling to get up as if he was looking at a piece of trash. You mobilized your men to deal with Sillin? Vanet stood up with difficulty. His vision was still a little blurry. After he finally recovered, he raised his trembling eyes and saw Gleason dodge, whose eyes were filled with coldness and anger. Vanet couldn't help but shiver. Why was this guy so angry? In terms of blood relations, Vanet was Dodge's cousin, but Vanet had always been very humble in front of this cousin who was only in his teens. Everyone in the Gleason family knew how special Dodge was. This young man who looked like a kid had entered the center of the family's power at a very young age. This young man was personally trained by one of the 3 generals of the Empire's military, the old master of the Gleason family. His viciousness and abilities far surpassed his peers. Even some of the elders of the Gleason family had to think twice before talking to Dodge, not to mention Vanet, who hadn't officially become a member of the family yet. He definitely wouldn't dare to disobey Dodge, even if he was slapped twice in the face the moment they met. Vanet panicked when he saw Dodge's slightly narrowed eyes flash with killing intent. This killing intent was clearly directed at him, not Sillin. Why? Sillin is just lucky enough to become a member of the RAS because he has Guanfeng's support. Why should the Gleason family be afraid of him? Vanet tried his best to defend himself. The Gleason family couldn't afford to lose, and they couldn't afford to lose. Who else did they need to be afraid of other than the Emperor and the 3 kings? So what if they were from the RAS? Guanfeng's words weren't the law there, and there were plenty of people who didn't like Guanfeng. Dodge grabbed Vanet's neck. His hand wasn't big, but it was as hard as steel. Vanet couldn't break it no matter how hard he tried. If you didn't have some value, I would have removed your head from your body already. I'm telling you, I'll only say it once, don't provoke Sillin. If I find out you're up to no good again, you and your subordinates will disappear. Dodge's voice wasn't loud, and it was very soft, but it was enough to make everyone's legs tremble uncontrollably. After that, Dodge tossed Vanet to the side and left with his men. Everyone in the research base lowered their heads when they saw Dodge. They were afraid that this young master would try to divert his anger. Go take care of things over there, in case Sillin decides to pursue the matter later. Dodge said to the person next to him after they came out. Yes. Then what about Sillin? I'll explain it to him myself. Dodge rubbed the space between his eyebrows. He couldn't help but get angry when he thought of what Vanet had done. Idiot. Guanfeng and the Gen family weren't the only ones supporting Sillin. There was also the power behind him. It wasn't just a secret weapon, It also meant that the Miss Bodhisattva Emperor had tacitly agreed to it. Cause trouble for Sillin? Did he have shit in his head? It was because Dodge was the old general's personal disciple that he knew some of the Empire's secrets. Ever since the storm Sillin caused in the academic world, Dodge knew that there were too many secrets behind it. Sillin wasn't too surprised to receive Gleason Dodge's message. Sillin accepted Dodge's explanation and apology as well. In fact, even if Dodge didn't show up and Vanek continued to target this matter, Sillin wasn't afraid. From the moment he took Sha Ro and Shurtang away, all records of Sha Ro and Shurtang on the planet had been erased. Even if a dispute arose later, he wouldn't lose. Of course, since Gleason Dodge had personally come forward to settle this matter, Sillin would give him face. Gleason Dodge was a man of maturity and experience that did not match his age, and he was not lacking in ruthlessness. Gleason believed that he would be able to take over this great noble in the future, and perhaps even further. Sillin sent a robot to move Sha Ro and Shurtang to a space fortress Shikai mentioned. Shurtang could receive the most professional treatment there, and there was a well-equipped laboratory for him. Apart from Shurtang, Sillin found a few more people along the planned route and sent them to the space fortress. Shikai was personally in charge, so there shouldn't be any problems. These people only knew that Sillin had provided them with the data. They didn't think that it was Black Viper. While Sillin was searching for the black box, the experiments on the Battlestar Bastion had begun as well. Genya told Sillin about the location, and Sillin did some calculations and marked out the most likely planet. They started their search from there. Every planet had its own characteristics and rhythm of life. Because there were a few unknown secondary education schools on this planet, the people on the planet were relatively more civilized. Of course, it was only in a relative sense. The spacecraft landed in a remote area. Sillin and Moon were busy collecting information on this planet over the past 1,000 years, while Huimao stared at the screen in boredom. Perhaps the old guys on the forums were afraid of arguing with Huimao, but they had quieted down a lot. No one was arguing, and Moon was enough to collect information. Huimao stretched and told Sillin to go find food before running off. Sillin was used to this, so he wasn't worried. As soon as Huimao stepped out of the spacecraft, he ran with all his might. It was uncomfortable being cooped up in the ship, and Sillin said that Huimao was getting fatter and fatter. He told Huimao to exercise more. They ran through a forest and were near the edge of town. With Huimao's hearing, he could hear the sounds of people and machines. Huimao wasn't planning on going into town. He'd just catch a few small animals in the forest for a change. But as he ran, Huimao's nose twitched, and he made a sharp turn in the direction the smell was coming from. On a patch of grass at the edge of town, a boy of about 14 or 15 sat with his legs bent. His bag was tossed to the side, and his clothes were wrinkled from being pulled. There were a few footprints on his clothes, and it was obvious he'd just gotten into a fight. At this moment, the young man was holding a light-heated lunchbox and eating the fish balls inside. This was his lunch. As he ate, the boy felt a weight on his wrist, and he found 2 fat cat paws on it. The fish ball on the fork fell because of this sudden movement, but it was swallowed by the cat's mouth before it fell to the ground. The boy maintained his previous action and stared at the fat cat that appeared without a sound. Was it because he was too engrossed in his thoughts and didn't pay attention to the movements around him? The boy stared at the cat, and the cat stared back at the boy with its round eyes, the fish balls in the lunchbox. You want to eat? Huimao nodded. Isn't this nonsense? Why would I come here if I didn't want to eat? The boy thought about it, and just when Huimao thought the person would hand him the lunchbox, he suddenly sped up and shoved a few fish balls into his mouth. Huimao. But before Huimao got mad, the boy placed the lunchbox in front of Huimao. There were 3 fish balls left inside. This is my lunch. You can't let me starve, right? The boy said while chewing the fish balls in his mouth. That's more like it, Huimao muttered. Puff. The boy spat out the fish ball he was chewing in his mouth. You can talk. This cat can talk. It should be a high-class breed. I heard that only rich people can afford to raise them. Huimao flicked his ears and ignored the boy's meaningless time-wasting question. He concentrated on eating the fish balls in the lunchbox. The boy wiped his mouth and observed the fat cat that was eating his lunch in front of him. There was no sign, no locator. How could he find the owner if the cat ran out? Was the locator implanted under the skin? After Huimao finished eating, he looked at the boy again. It was too little, just enough to fill the gap between his teeth. No, that's all I have. The boy spread his hands, then lay down and looked at the sky with his arms as a pillow. No more? Huimao licked his mouth, walked to the boy's bag, and lifted his paw to open it. Hey, it's impolite to rummage through other people's bags. What is polite? Huimao continued to rummage. The boy. Intermediate school curriculum. Aha, you're skipping class. Huimao looked as if he had caught the boy's weak point and proudly wagged his tail. The boy curled his lips. What is skipping class? Huimao's whiskers trembled. This boy actually used this trick. He looked at the bag again. There was really nothing to eat. When he was about to leave, he saw the boy lying on the grass and began to weave a frog. This kind of straw frog was a little different from ordinary ones, with some extra skills. The youth turned over and laid on his stomach. Facing a tree not far away, he pressed the grass-knitted frog behind him. When he released it, the grass-knitted frog would jump high and rush towards the tree. After hitting the tree, the grass-knitted frog would bounce back and land right beside the youth's hand. This movement looked very familiar. The boy must have come here often to do this. Looking at the jumping straw frog, Huimao rubbed his paw. His paw was itchy. The boy pressed the straw frog that bounced back and let it continue to jump toward the tree. A fat figure appeared in the air and slapped the straw frog that was about to hit the tree. The boy's eyes twitched. This fat cat could actually jump so high. It was so fat, but it was still quite agile. Huimao bent his paw and pushed the straw frog towards the boy. The boy then continued to flick the frog and Huimao continued to slap it. Looking at the fat cat jumping around, the boy smiled. This cat definitely didn't know how much fat it was shaking when it jumped. After playing for a while, Huimao felt that it was no longer challenging and stopped playing. He hooked the straw frog with his paw and looked at the boy. This frog is pretty good. Of course, I've been playing this since I was young. I've also tried it. This grass is tough and has the best effect. The boy said proudly. What grass is this? What's its scientific name? Huimao continued to ask. The boy frowned. I don't know, why are you looking at me like that? Who would have the time to find out the scientific name of this weed? Huimao looked at the boy with disdain. You've been making it for fun since you were young. After playing for so many years, you don't even know its scientific name. The boy felt that the fat cat in front of him was not cute at all. Not cute at all. Humph. The boy got up and ignored Huimao. He patted the grass off his clothes and left with his bag. Hey, where are you going? Huimao followed behind him. It's none of your business. Aren't you afraid that your owner will worry about you running around? No. Aren't you afraid that I'll sell you? Sell me. Huimao didn't care. The boy. Pausing, the boy turned to look at Huimao. Why are you following me? I want to know where you bought your fish balls. I didn't buy them. I made them myself. The boy looked at Huimao, whose eyes were obviously lit up. Then he turned and ran. Judging from the size of this cat, its appetite was definitely not a joke. Just like the ant next door said. Why are people poor? They are all poor because they eat. It was definitely not a good thing to be pestered by this fat cat. The boy seemed to see the scene of the fish that he didn't stock up disappearing one by one. Fuck. The more he thought about it, the faster he ran. There weren't many people on the streets of the small town at this time. Even if someone saw the boy running like he was a ghost, they just shook their head and didn't say anything. Everyone knew that this kid was a good fighter, so they didn't have the time to care about him. After running across a street and around a corner, the boy leaned against the wall and panted slightly. When he looked up, he saw a pair of round cat eyes. The boy. Huimao calmly squatted on top of the trash can, grinned and raised his paw to say hello. Yo! Yo my ass. The boy leaned against the wall and squatted down, covering his face. This fat cat, this damn fatty. Chapter 317. Alright. Tell me. What do you want? The boy squatting on the ground looked at the gray cat without getting up. I'm going to your house for fish balls. Huimao's tone sounded like it was perfectly reasonable. The boy really wanted to shove the cat into the trash can. You want to freeload at my house? I'm sorry, but I'm poor. You'll have to pay if you really want to go, said the boy. Weeze's ears twitched when it heard that he had to pay. How much? Depends on how much you eat. I'll give you a discount. $1 for one fish ball. What do you think? Huimao compared the difference between the fish balls and the fish biscuits he'd eaten before, and decided that it was a good deal. Fine. Someone will come and pay for it later. The boy looked at Huimao's determined expression and shook his head. He was probably waiting for the cat's owner to pay. He stood up helplessly and asked, "What's your name?" If no one came to pay at that time, they could just send out a notice and forget about it. My name is Hugh. Huimao was about to tell the boy his real name, when he suddenly remembered that Silin had told him that he should keep a low profile now that he was a celebrity in the industry. Huimao paused for a moment before continuing. My nickname is Wheeze. What about you? The boy glanced at the fat cat in front of him. A cat even has a nickname. I'm Tesoro. Tesoro grabbed his bag and walked back to his house. Huimao bounced along behind him. On the other side, Silin and Moon had collected some information and done a general scan of the planet. They did find some residue on the black box, but it was very small and was located near the town. They didn't find anything else. Silin finally managed to collect some of the residue, but it was so old that he could only gather limited information. The only thing he knew was that the black box wasn't on the planet. But Silin had a feeling that the planet would give him a key piece of information if he wanted to find the black box. As for what that key piece of information was, Silin hadn't figured it out yet. The time when these remnants left the black box is not fixed. Some are from 700 to 800 years ago, while others are from less than 100 years ago. Moreover, the amount was different. There was more residue from more than 700 years ago, but because the residue was too little, it was still uncertain what was going on. Oh, I also detected some extremely weak signals. I need time to further analyze the location. You sent the information to Silin and said. Silin rubbed his chin as he stared at the statistics displayed on the screen. Although he still couldn't understand why this was happening, it was a good sign to be able to detect the residue that had fallen off the black box. At the very least, it could be considered a clue. If he could find the black box, he could save more time. Otherwise, if he were to rely solely on those people's research, even if he could return to the League of Stars, he would be too old. Silin was deep in thought when he suddenly received a message from Huimao. Silin, someone invited me to eat fish balls. I won't go over for now. Based on Silin's understanding of Huimao, it wasn't easy to tell how trustworthy the word invite was. Not long after, Huimao sent him another message. You can come and pay for me when the time comes. 1 fish ball for 1 MB coin. Silin stared at the message on his communicator and thought, I knew it. I wonder which unlucky bastard Huimao is messing with me. After checking Weeze's current location, Silin decided to ignore it for the time being. He continued to process the data he obtained and analyze the residue further. Meanwhile, Yu and a few sampling robots went deeper into the black box to investigate the residue. Huimao followed Tesoro to a residential area. The houses here looked old and similar to Old Man Chang's, except that the average living space here was slightly larger and more spacious. Tesoro's 3-story house looked a little shabby from the outside. It looked like 3 old houses stacked on top of each other. Tesoro took out a key card, inserted it, pulled, but the door didn't open. He pulled again, but the door still didn't open. Bang! Tesoro kicked the door and pulled again. The door shook twice and opened. Huimao stared at the open door and sighed. I can't believe I kicked the door. But before Huimao could express his thoughts, a rotten smell hit Huimao's face and almost made him collapse on the floor. Hey old man, did you lose control of your bowels? Tesoro shouted while covering his nose. Shut up. I'm making pickles. A hoarse voice came from the kitchen. The words weren't clear, and it sounded like the person was holding something in his mouth. Who still eats that stuff these days? Tesoro said disdainfully. A broken shoe flew at him. Go do the laundry. Tesoro calmly dodged the shoe. Didn't you say you'd fix the washing machine when you have time? I don't have time. Don't disturb my pickles. Also, treat your wounds after the fight. It'll be a waste of money if you get infected and have to go to the hospital again. Strangely enough, the person knew that Tesoro had fought without coming out to check. Got it. Go ahead and pickle the vegetables, Tesoro said impatiently as he headed upstairs. The kitchen door opened, and a rather unkempt middle-aged man with unkempt hair and an apron with suspicious yellow stains stood at the kitchen door. He had a cigarette in his mouth, so his words weren't very clear. The middle-aged man frowned when he saw Tesoro going upstairs. Why are you playing truant again? I'm paying you to go to school, not to play truant. Huh. Where did this fat cat come from? This meat can be sold for a lot of money. Go do your pickles. I'm going to use the kitchen later, Tesoro said without looking back. The middle-aged man sized up Huimao and snorted. He then went back to pickling. Huimao followed Tesoro upstairs to Tesoro's room. The room wasn't big, but it was clean and tidy. Unlike the man's usual style, everything was neatly arranged. After entering the room, Tesoro skillfully treated his wounds. They were only superficial wounds. His lungs and bones weren't hurt. Tesoro lay down on the bed right after he was done. Huimao couldn't help but ask, "How much longer do we have to wait?" "We have to wait for that old man to finish pickling his vegetables. Do you want to eat fish balls with pickled vegetables?" Huimao shook his head hard. "Then let's wait. It won't be too long. I just need a nap." Tesoro closed his eyes and rested. He really didn't want to go to school. Those people wouldn't let him have a peaceful time. They would always find excuses to fight him. Fighting was one thing, but he hated it when people called him a bastard or a bastard. Tesoro couldn't help but beat them up. Besides, what did commoners like them need education for? Only those who wanted to be slaves to nobles would go to school. Commoners living in this area wouldn't waste time and money to send their children to school. Tesoro was annoyed when he thought about it. He rested his head on his arm and tried to forget about it so he could have a good sleep. Wheeze was crouching on top of the cabinet. It had slept for a long time on the space plane, and it couldn't sleep right now. But it was also bored, so it went to Tesoro's room to look for something to play with and pass the time. Tesoro felt someone poking him in the face. Tesoro was usually on high alert when he was outside, but he would only relax when he was home. Tesoro's current state was that of being at home, so he didn't make any reflex attacks. When he opened his eyes, he saw the fat cat slapping his face with its paw. "What's up?" Tesoro yawned. Something was wrong. He looked again and saw a 1-meter-long square box behind Huimao. The box was already open. Tesoro sat up straight and took the box. He checked its contents and heaved a sigh of relief when he found that it wasn't damaged or missing. "You're not allowed to play with this," Tesoro said and tried to hide the box. "Don't hide it. I have a question for you." Huimao stopped Tesoro from closing the box and pointed at a knife inside. "Is this yours?" The box was filled with miniaturized weapons. There were knives, spears, sticks, and sticks, but they were different from ordinary weapons. "It's just a toy model. Why are you asking?" Tesoro was puzzled. Huimao pointed at the khaki-colored folding knife again. "Did you buy it or was it a gift?" "None of your business," Tesoro snapped, but he sounded a little weak. Ignoring the fat cat, Tesoro closed the box and was about to hide it again when he paused and looked at Huimao. "Why are you interested in it? I can make one for you if you like it, but the price will be different." "Why would I want a model? It's not as good as a real knife." Huimao thought for a moment and said, "There's a scratch on your model." "A scratch?" Tesoro opened the box again. "Where?" Huimao pointed at a spot on the khaki-colored knife. "Here." "Oh, it's already here." Tesoro was relieved that Huimao was only pointing at a spot that looked like a scratch on the knife. Huimao pestered Tesoro with more questions about the model. Eventually, Tesoro was annoyed and told him that the model was made by his father as a toy when he was young. Tesoro lied to his father and told him that he had thrown them away, which made his father so angry that he beat him up. In fact, Tesoro had been hiding the model all this time. Tesoro hid the box and threatened Huimao not to tell anyone about it. If he did, he wouldn't give Huimao any fish balls. Huimao lowered his head and curled his tail in an arc. He slowly swung it back and forth. If Silin had seen Huemao's reaction, he would have known that the cat was plotting against him again. When Tesoro's sloppy father was finally done with the pickling, Tesoro took out the leftover fish balls he had made 2 days ago. He counted 10 fish balls, put them on a plate, and handed them to Huimao, who was squatting next to the table. It was almost dinner time. Tesoro made some simple preparations for dinner and put it on the table. His father was already sitting calmly with his legs crossed, waiting for dinner. At dinner time, Huimao was eating his 3rd plate of fish balls. Every now and then, Huimao would poke Tesoro's sloppy father. Although the pickling was done, the man still smelled sour and rotten. But that wasn't what Huimao was paying attention to. While Huimao was poking Tesoro's sloppy father, both Tesoro and his father were staring at Huimao. They didn't expect such a small cat to eat so much. What kind of stomach did he have? What are you looking at, little fat cat? Keep staring and I'll sell you, said the sloppy father as he picked his teeth. After finishing the last fish ball on his plate, Huimao licked his paws and wiped his mouth. He then looked at his father. Were you a soldier? The man who was picking his teeth absent-mindedly paused and narrowed his eyes. Although there was still a hint of a smile on his face, Tesoro knew that his father's knife was about to reach out to him. Ignoring Tesoro's look, Huimao continued licking his paws. You know Tu Ba? Xing. 5 knife-like fingers pressed against Huimao. Those were the special bones on Tesoro's father's fingers. He was a half-mutant. Tesoro, on the other hand, had a quarter of mutant blood in him. This was why many people thought that Tesoro was dirty. Whenever mutants were involved, people would look down on them, and they would have to endure hostility and ostracism. It only took a moment for the 5 special bones to press against Huimao's round head. It was clear that this man wasn't as sloppy as he looked. Right now, the man's eyes were filled with murderous intent, as if he would kill Huimao again if he said anything. If this person was like a sloppy worm a moment ago, then he was like a lion that was about to start hunting. He was still the same man who smelled like pickles, but anyone who stood in front of him would feel the bloodthirst and murderous aura. However, Huimao calmly licked his paws as if he didn't see it. He had seen Tu Ba's folding knife before. The scratches on the knife were actually Tu Ba's personal markings. If he hadn't met Tu Ba at Black Viper's test site, Huimao wouldn't have known about this. Shusag stared at the cat who was still licking its paws calmly. He didn't know if the cat was calm or slow. But after waiting for a long time, the cat was still licking its paws and wiping its face, completely ignoring him. Shusag couldn't wait any longer. How do you know Tu Ba? Shusag's 5 special bones were still pressed against Huimao, and his other hand was secretly signing to Tesoro in a language that only he and Tesoro could understand. Tesoro had mixed feelings when he saw Shusag's secret code, but he still backed away obediently and left the matter to his father to handle. He didn't expect to bring back not only a glutton but also a huge problem. Chapter 318. Huimao licked his paws. The man in front of him must know Tu Ba, and they should be on good terms. But why was he reacting so strongly? Are you Tu Ba's comrades in arms? Huimao cocked his head at Tu Ba as if he couldn't sense Tu Ba's hostility. Shusag didn't say anything. What happened back then was too much of a blow for him to handle, so he didn't dare say anything before he got to the bottom of things. Fine, another question. Huimao's tail twitched as he pondered what to ask. There were some things he couldn't say, but he had to get to the bottom of this man's background. Huimao didn't plan on contacting Silin. He wanted to get to the bottom of this on his own. Silin and Moon proved that he was a thoughtful cat. I know Tu Ba. We were teammates before. But that kid isn't strong enough. He's barely holding us back. Weeza's words caused Shusag's face to twitch abruptly. Tu Ba isn't strong enough? Who are you kidding? Back in the day, Tu Ba was the only person in the company who could hold his own for a while. Plus, after so many years, Shusag knew that Tu Ba could only be stronger than he was now. Shusag carefully observed Huimao's eyes as he spoke, and moved his finger knife away. How is he now? Don't you know that Tu Ba was sent to the Imperial prison? Prison? How? Shusag couldn't believe it. I think he was sent to the Imperial prison for treason, and it's a life sentence. Huimao didn't say anything about Black Viper. The man in front of him wouldn't contact Tu Ba anyway. Plus, he was telling the truth. If Tu Ba hadn't been dragged into Black Viper, he would still be in the Imperial prison. Bang! Shusag's finger knife sliced the table into several pieces. Shusag slowly took out a cigarette with his non-specialized hand. His hand was shaking uncontrollably. One could only imagine how intense a person like him must be feeling right now. When did that happen? Shusag's voice was hoarse and suppressed. It should be 3 years ago. Huimao recalled the information he overheard Silin and the others talking about Tu Ba. He said with certainty, yes, he was imprisoned in the Empire's high-security prison 3 years ago. Shusag sat in his chair, his body radiating an aura of melancholy and dejection. His eyes were bloodshot, but Shusag couldn't tell if he was angry or feeling sorry for Tu Ba. At the very least, Huimao couldn't understand what was going on. Human emotions were too complicated, and Huimao couldn't tell them apart. Just then the doorbell rang. Shusag didn't move. Tesoro glanced at his father, who wasn't paying attention at all. Then he glanced at Huimao, who was licking his paw as if nothing had happened. Tesoro walked to the door helplessly. Opening the door of their house required skill. A couple of kicks later, Tesoro pulled the door open. It was none other than Silin. Before Tesoro could say anything, Huimao yelled, "Why are you here so soon?" Silin smiled apologetically at the puzzled and wary Tesoro and said, "I'm sorry for the trouble he caused." Tesoro nodded. It looked like this person was the owner of the fat cat. Entering the house, Silin sensed the strange atmosphere. Shusag, who was sitting there smoking, still had one of his hands in his specialized form. The blade of his finger bone was chilling. Tesoro had been observing Silin's reaction ever since he entered the room. To his surprise, however, Silin didn't show much of a reaction to his father's finger blades. Tesoro immediately felt a lot more at ease. After all, mutants were the most ostracized and discriminated against. Even if you weren't a pure mutant, as long as you had a mutant bloodline, you were still considered lowly. Silin looked at Huimao and asked him what was going on. Huimao explained it to Silin in robotic language, looking smug and eager for praise. Good job. Silin rubbed Huimao's round head. Although Huimao was a little reckless, it didn't matter. Silin could handle it. Shusag's file on this planet was simple as a normal resident. But Silin knew that Shusag had disguised his information. His real information wouldn't be recorded in the resident's HR system. Shusag was a comrade of Tu Ba, which meant that he was also a member of the Imperial United Garrison. It wasn't easy to survive in the military as a half-mutant. "I'd like to know something about Tu Ba," Shusag finally said from his chair. Celine pulled a chair over. "I'm not too sure myself. All I know is that he was sent to the highest security prison of the Empire for treason. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, and he had only recently been promoted to the rank of first lieutenant." "Lieutenant? That kid's better than me." Shusag rubbed his reddened eyes and looked down. "You guys can go." Silin didn't linger. He grabbed Huimao, said goodbye to Tesoro, and left. Back in the spaceplane, Silin did some research on Shusag. With Silin's current authority, he could look up information on the United Garrison's HR system. However, Silin was careful not to leave any traces behind. He didn't want anyone to find out that he was investigating Shusag. "Why are you investigating him, Silin? It's enough that you know he knows Tu Ba. Why do you need to investigate him so thoroughly? You might as well go find the black box and get back to the League of Stars," Huimao said. "I have my own plans. You should think about how to lose weight. Look at your body." Silin poked Huimao. The guy looked like a ball of fur when he squatted there. Shusag was his real name, but some records had been changed and a lot of information had been erased. He had to find Tu Ba if he wanted to know more. From Tu Ba, Silin learned more about Shusag and the real reason Tu Ba was sent to the Imperial Penitentiary. Shusag had something to do with it. Back in the day, Shusag, a half-mutant, worked his way up to the rank of lieutenant. However, he was disgraced by a minor noble for standing in his way, and expelled from the army. What followed was the betrayal and frame-up of his gentle wife. In order to avoid being hunted down by the minor noble, Shusag had no choice but to bring his 5-year-old son, to Zoro, with him to a small, unknown planet. There, he had to endure the oppression of starting from scratch. In order to make a living, Shusag had even melted down his precious platinum military medal and sold it to raise more money to escape. Back then, there were people he was close to in the military, but there were even more people who disliked him, especially those who discriminated against mutants. That was why after Shusag's incident, there were a lot of people who added insult to injury. In the end, it was Tu-Ba who put a stop to it. 3 years ago, Tu-Ba seized the opportunity to kill the minor noble and sent him to the Imperial Penitentiary for treason. Tu-Ba was a good soldier, but he wasn't a good schemer. Back when he was kicked out of the military, Shusag was only a second lieutenant. If nothing had happened back then, he would have been promoted to a field officer in the next 10 years. A half-mutant with no background was able to achieve all this with his own strength. Back in the day, Shusag was the best fighter in the company, followed by Tu-Ba. According to what Tu-Ba said, Shusag was a good person. According to Silen's plan, he could bring a few good seedlings back to the League of Stars, especially those with mutant bloodlines who had always been suppressed. For example, Sharo, Shurtang, and now Shusag and his son. That being said, Silen still wanted to see how he would deal with Shusag and his son. The next morning, Shusag, who hadn't slept all night, was woken up by the doorbell. When he opened the door, he saw Silen, Huimao, and Moon standing at the door. Rent. Shusag rubbed his unkempt hair. Who knew how long it had been since he last combed his beard? Yes, we can negotiate the rent. Shusag thought for a moment. I don't know why you're doing this, but don't drag us into a conflict. Of course, we're only here for research and sampling. We don't want people to know who we really are, so we're using you as a shield. Silen took out a prepared agreement, and Shusag signed it after reading it. He didn't think that an agreement was worth shit as long as they didn't admit it. Still, Shusag wanted to know more about Silen's group, so he didn't object to them renting his house. And so Silen lived here as a distant relative of Shusag's. Most of the time, Silen, Moon, and Huimao would go out and search for the remnants of the black boxes. The robots they sent out also searched all over the planet, but to no avail. After a few days of searching, they only managed to find the remnants of the black boxes at different times. Aside from that, Silen got to know Shusag and his son better. One of them had the rebelliousness and awkwardness of youth, and the other didn't know how to express his love as a father. The father and son quarreled on the surface, but deep down, they both knew that the other was good to them. Shusag kept calling them little bastard, but Silen knew that he cared a lot about Tesoro. In the language of the mutants, Tesoro meant treasure. During the few days they stayed here, Silen got along well with Shusag and his son. Huimao had fish balls to eat every day, and he also got to try some of Shusag's homemade pickles. Although they smelled horrible at first, they got better after a while. At least, that was what Silen thought. When all the information on the planet was gathered, Silen was ready to leave. Before he left, Silen told Tu-Ba to contact Shusag. Of course, he didn't tell him about Black Viper and left out some of the key details. Shusag didn't press the issue. Now that he knew Silen was doing well, he felt less guilty and slept better. His attitude toward Silen was a lot more sincere. That night, Shusag prepared a sumptuous dinner. Silen decided to leave the next day, so the dinner was his farewell. It happened to be the day when Tesoro returned from his vacation. Tesoro came back with a piece of news. I heard there's going to be a meteor shower tonight. You guys can watch it. A lot of people at school are talking about it. A lot of people are even using the meteor shower as an excuse to date, Tesoro said. Then why didn't you invite a daughter-in-law for me? Shusag didn't hold back. Tesoro curled his lips but didn't say anything. At school, the way the girls looked at him made him want to rush up and slap them. He knew what they were saying behind his back. Once, when he skipped class to sleep by the flower bed, he heard them talking behind his back. Tesoro remembered very clearly that those people had said that even his blood was dirty. Because of Tesoro's notoriety, some people didn't dare say it to his face, but they did whisper behind his back. Tesoro had long since lost all hope in his so-called schoolmates. He had always been a lone ranger at school. Realizing something, Shusag stopped asking questions. For a moment, neither father nor son said anything. Seeing this, Sillin broke the awkward atmosphere and asked Tesoro, "Where can we see the meteor shower?" "We can see it from this area. Of course, we can go to the grassland further away. It'll be quieter there. There will probably be a lot of people watching the meteor shower in town. It'll be noisy." Sillin nodded. "Let's go check it out tonight then. There's nothing to do anyway." "Okay." Tesoro was overjoyed. Compared to Tesoro's excitement, Huimao didn't feel anything. It was just a meteor shower. What was there to see? He might as well sleep at home. That being said, Huimao followed Sillin and the others to the grassland further away from town where he first encountered Tesoro. The meteor shower arrived in the wee hours of the morning. The friction between the atmosphere created countless sparkling ribbons, which excited many young people. Even from where they stood, they could hear the shouts of the youngsters in town. However, there wasn't much romance to speak of here. All they did was take care of Tesoro's curiosity. Beep 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 beep. The urgent notification surprised Sillin, but his expression changed when he saw the data sent back by the probe robots scattered around the area. Moon also noticed that something was wrong. As the meteor shower arrived, he detected the signal of residual matter. Although the signal wasn't obvious, it was definitely the signal of residual matter. The residual matter really came from outside the planet, and came with the meteor shower. Meteor shower. Looking at the bright lights streaking across the sky like raindrops, Sillin shuddered. He turned to Huimao, who was yawning, and Moon, who was counting the signal points, and said, "Check the comets orbiting this star region." Seeing that Sillin and the others were suddenly busy, Tesoro pushed Shusag in confusion. "Old man, why are they checking the comets?" "How would I know? I'm not educated." "Aren't you from an intermediate school?" "Tesoro." "Celine, this is the result of our investigation." Moon projected the results in front of him. The image showed all the periodic comets in this star region, their orbits, and the places the planet had passed. "Don't call back the probes. Let them continue to collect the residual matter that came with the meteor shower. Let's go back to the space plane," Sillin said to Moon. "We're leaving." "All right." Sillin paused and looked back at the father and son. "Maybe I'll contact you again soon. Don't move." After that, Sillin turned around and ran to the space plane parked in the woods with Moon and Huimao. The fundamental cause of these meteor showers was the comet's fragmentation, and the leftover material might have come from the comet's debris. If everything was as Sillin had guessed, then the black box might very well be on the comet's orbit. Chapter 319. After returning to the spaceplane, Sillin, Huimao, and Moon analyzed the information and found the comet in the meteor shower. Then, Sillin sent out several trackers to track the comet to see if there was any signal from the black box. Sillin did some calculations. The location and time when Genya encountered the unstable wormhole happened to be very close to the target comet. Perhaps for some reason, the black box on the comet reacted and triggered a wormhole that led to the League of Stars. After that, the comet moved away, and the wormhole became unstable, closing the passage. The whole process didn't last long, and Genya wasn't that close to the planet, so it didn't attract much attention. According to the information Sillin had gathered, although some people had noticed an abnormal energy and spatial fluctuation at a place a certain distance away from the planet, the signal and communication equipment had been disrupted at the time, and it hadn't lasted for a long time. There were many different opinions after the incident, and no conclusion could be drawn. Although there was evidence from various incidents, it was all speculation before a definite conclusion was reached. Sillin, Huimao, and Moon stared at the signals sent back by the trackers on the screen. The trackers were getting closer and closer to the comet, and when the light that represented the signal intensity on the screen grew brighter and brighter, Sillin knew his speculation was confirmed. It's really there. Moon was so happy that he spun in circles like a top. Just like Sigma, they liked to swing their arms when they were happy. Hurry up and find it. We can go back when we find it, right, Sillin? Huimao looked at Sillin expectantly. I think so. Let's see what's going on with the black box first. Sillin was calmer than the others, but he was also excited. Although he had made some preparations, Finding the black box would save him a lot of time. From the analysis of the trackers, he could see the general location of the black box on the comet, but it would take a lot of effort to get it out. Sillin was going to contact Shikai and ask him to send a robot to solve the problem, but Moon stopped him. He wanted to get the black box himself. Perhaps Moon no longer trusted the Shi family the most. He was afraid that the Shi family would do something to harm him and Sigma, such as tossing the black box into a research lab. Although Moon and the other Origin robots looked ancient, they were made of the best materials available. Plus, Moon had upgraded himself several times before he sent Moon to retrieve the black box from the comet. That was why Sillin decided to send Moon to retrieve the black box. Moon was very satisfied with Sillin's behavior because Sillin's first concern was his safety, not whether he could take out the black box. Seeing that Yu was going to help, Huimao also expressed his willingness to help. The black box was too important for Huimao, and he was tired of living in the Mist Bodhisattva Empire. Everything he did was restricted, and although he was a bit more lenient when it came to foreign beasts, he wasn't as free as he was when he was a hunter regiment. After all, this wasn't his territory. Not even Huimao would feel at ease if he sent another robot to retrieve the black box from the comet. To him, no robot was better than himself and Moon. There were a lot of floating debris in space when they approached the comet's orbit. Sillin first cleared away these obstacles, and then found the safest time to release Whis and Moon out of the comet. They were robots after all, so they weren't as restricted by the same conditions as humans. Huimao grabbed Moon and had him take it to the comet. Moon knew the black box better than Moon, so he knew how to remove it from the dirty Shueqiu without damaging it. Huimao assisted him from the side. As for Sillin, Sillin stayed on the spaceplane to provide some extra support. If anything happened on the comet, Sillin would teleport them back to the comet using fixed-point teleportation. Even if the comet's environment wasn't suitable for fixed-point teleportation, he would still do his best to ensure the accuracy of the teleportation. Sillin had made a lot of preparations, but to his surprise, the process of removing the black box from the comet was smoother than expected. Moon had done everything perfectly, and he had even considered some of the details beforehand. Just as Chip had said, Moon was the smartest among the 5 robots. He was also the one who knew how to play dumb the most. The black box wasn't as big as Sillin thought. It was only 2 meters long, but it contained the crystallization of the Shi family's wisdom at its peak. After being buried for nearly 1,000 years, the mysterious and extraordinary look on the surface of the black box made everyone who saw it feel an inexplicable excitement. Some peripherals were needed to activate the black box, and these could all be prepared according to the black box. Sillin wasn't worried. Considering the capabilities of the people left behind on the research bastion, this shouldn't be a big problem. Carefully packing the black box, Huimao didn't even log on to the forum. Instead, he squatted next to Moon, fearing that something might go wrong. Seeing Huimao like this, Sillin smiled. It seemed that the robot was eager to return. No wonder we couldn't find it. It was on the comet. It's been orbiting the comet. It's no longer where it used to be, Moon said. The blue light on Ayu's face curved into 2 curves, showing that Ayu was in a good mood. Sillin nodded when he heard Moon's words. It was a matter of luck. Those people wouldn't have thought that the black box was on the comet, would they? Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to find it. Sillin was thankful that the black box was on a periodic comet, not a non-periodic one. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known where to start looking. When Shikai learned that Sillin had found the black box, he felt conflicted. On one hand, he was happy that he'd found it. After all, he'd be able to see what the Shi family's original home looked like. He'd also be able to meet the mysterious original robot, Sigma. On the other hand, he felt helpless. How did Sillin find it so quickly? Didn't the Shi family send people to look for it? Was this another way of saying that the Shi family weren't as good as Sillin? Now it was obvious that Moon was closer to Sillin and distant from the Shi family. This made Shikai's heart sour. Though his thoughts were conflicted, he knew what he needed to do. Sillin had already told him about the resources he needed in advance. The researchers who stayed in the space fortress were easier to control. They weren't as scheming as Sillin had suggested. After Sillin delivered the black box, the researchers got to work under Moon's direction. Seeing how familiar Moon was with the black box, Sillin knew that he hadn't been telling the truth. Perhaps he didn't know everything about the technology, but he knew far more than anyone else. It wasn't like he said he didn't know anything. This little fellow's guard was quite heavy, but it was understandable. If it weren't for that, Moon would have been sent to the lab and become a second chip. The researchers, including Shirtang, were very excited. Being able to participate in this project and understand this technology was a great gift to them. These people almost worked day and night to prepare and process the peripherals under the guidance of a U. But every once in a while, a U would ask them to stop and rest. After all, these people were not robots, and there was a limit to their energy. Celine watched the entire process from the side. Sometimes he would join in and help out. Through this process, he learned a lot about this technology. In his heart, Celine was also planning when he would have the opportunity to create a second black box. However, this was not something he could easily do alone. When the peripherals were finished, Celine had a chat with Moon. All that was left to do was debug and check. Moon was the only one who could do this. He had set up a very complicated password for the black box. There were a few things Celine needed to take care of before he returned to the League of Stars. Also, Huimao had been eyeing the fish biscuits produced in the Miss Bodhisattva Empire, and he had to bring gifts to Xueqiu and the Miantuan. Moon didn't mind. He waved a hand and told Celine and Huimao to get to work. No one would be able to activate the black box in advance with him around. When he said this, you deliberately looked at Shikai next to him. Shikai felt like he was stuck on a fishbone. After Celine and the others left, he returned to the Shi family's electronic planet and chatted with Chip for the entire day. It was true that not every origin robot was as easy to talk to as Chip. Shikai needed Chip to teach him how to get along with the origin robot better. What if Sigma ignored him, a true descendant of the Shi family, just like Moon did? His ancestors would probably kill him in his dreams if that happened. Celine actually had a lot of things to do right now. AF1's classes, the RES project, Guanfeng's project, and the problems he had to deal with as one of the 3 people in charge of Black Viper. However, these weren't the most important things to Celine right now. He could apply to suspend AF1's classes, and there were plenty of people willing to take over the RES project. Guanfeng wouldn't be affected too much even without him. As for Black Viper, he could let it go for a while. In the past, Guanfeng had always been a hands-off boss. Right now, Celine's top priority was to talk to Genya. When Celine arrived at the courtyard next to the artificial sea, Genya was sitting on a recliner under a tree. Master. Celine stood beside the deck chair and said softly. Genya opened his eyes. He wasn't smiling like he used to when he saw Celine. Although he was smiling now, Celine sensed a hint of melancholy in Genya's eyes. Genya's health had been improving ever since he returned to the Gen family. Just like Genya said, the Fuji tree had some sort of healing effect on the Gen family. Right now, Genya still looked old on the outside, but his bodily functions were almost the same as a middle-aged man's. The only difference was that Genya had gone through so much and experienced so much. Have you found a way to return? Genya asked. Judging from his calm tone, Celine knew that Genya was mentally prepared for this. Celine nodded. Yes. Genya let out a long sigh. Celine, there's something I'd like to talk to you about in private. What he meant was that he didn't want anyone around him, not even Huimao. Huimao had already gone off to chat with Blueskin. After all, he wouldn't be back for a long time after he left. The guards around the yard were sent away, and Celine soundproofed the area. Although they were still here, no one could hear their conversation from 2 meters away. It was impossible to guess what they were talking about based on the movement of their lips. After everything was done, Celine stood there quietly and waited for Genya to continue. Ever since Celine could understand things, he knew that his master wasn't happy at all. Hina said that it was because Genya was missing someone. Later, when Celine received the ring with the curly leaf pattern, he thought that Genya was like that because he missed the Gen family of the Miss Bodhisattva Empire. But after returning to the Gen family, Celine realized that wasn't entirely the case. Celine didn't know who Genya was missing, and he didn't ask about it. Knowing Genya's temper, it was impossible to pry the answer out of him if he didn't want to tell anyone. After a long period of silence, Genya finally spoke. I've been thinking about it since the last time you came to ask me those questions. Genya said slowly. I left behind a logbook in the League of Stars, but I didn't carry it with me later on. It's a record of my daily life in the League of Stars, and I left it somewhere before I left for planet Brown Earth. Genya had created a partial star map, and it was necessary to compare it with the League of Stars' star map in order to find the place. However, the League of Stars wasn't the Miss Bodhisattva Empire, and the League of Stars didn't have a complete star map. Go there and find a man named Hara. Tell him to take back the things I left with him, and he'll give you the record book. Which sector of the League of Stars does this place belong to? Sillin asked while pointing at the partial star map. Sector S. Sillin was astonished. He didn't think that Genya had been to Sector S before. But how did he get in and out of a place like that safely? Or was it just luck? Genya didn't explain too much. He simply said, the key to open the logbook is the ring on your finger. If anyone tries to open the logbook by force, it will self-destruct. From what I know of Hara, he should have kept the logbook very well. Once you find the logbook, you'll know everything about me. There's a special record of 2 people in the logbook. If you meet them, please give this to them. Genya took out a box with a necklace and a badge inside. The necklace was a woman's style, and the green gemstone embedded on it was exquisite and pure. It looked like it contained a lot of life, and it was much better than the green pearls Sillin had found back then. There was a pattern on the gemstone, and it was the emblem of the Fuji royal family's Gen family. However, the pattern on it was slightly different from the emblem worn by most members of the Gen family. It was an emblem only worn by members of the royal family, or those who were extremely close to them. The badge was similar to the one worn by Gen Xingming's father, the current King Fuji. It was a very good proof of identity in itself. Sillin had always thought that only the children of the current King Fuji like Gen Xingming and Gen Xingming would have such proof of identity. He didn't think that there would be another. Seeing through Sillin's thoughts, Genya explained, my royal brother purposely left this extra badge for me back then. He gave it to me after I returned. Genya only explained half of it. The hidden meaning behind his explanation was that Genya would give this badge to his son or daughter as well. Genya actually has a wife and child in the League of Stars. Sillin looked at Genya. He still had a lot of questions, but Genya's "don't ask me. I don't want to say anything" look didn't come out of his mouth. He would know everything once he found the logbook. Sillin accepted the box containing the 2 items. You're not going to meet them. Genya lowered his eyes and didn't say anything. However, his lips were tightly pursed and his fingers were rubbing his sleeves. Seeing Genya like this, Sillin knew that Genya was conflicted. He said, if possible, I'll see if I can bring them to reunite with you. The possibility is very small, Genya said in a low voice. No matter how Sillin listened to his tone, he felt that he was full of grievance. Sillin glanced at Genya with an odd expression. He didn't know that his master had such a side to him. I understand. If everything goes smoothly, I'll bring you to meet them when I return, Sillin answered. Genya turned his head to the side and didn't say anything. Sillin took this as a tacit agreement. Before leaving, Genya told Sillin, don't worry, I'll take care of things here. As for you, be careful when you return to the other side. Your safety is the most important. Yes, master. I know what to do. Don't worry. Sillin gave Genya a hug before leaving the courtyard. He brought Huimao to buy the fish biscuits and gifts it had been longing for. Sillin rubbed his forehead when he saw Huimao's list. It's not like we're not coming back. Why do you need to buy so many things? Huimao thought for a moment and realized that Qin Lai was right. Therefore, he circled some of the important items with his paw. Then I'll buy these first. I can't go any lower. All right. But you need to lose weight, glutton. Besides the fish biscuits, Huimao also took the opportunity to roar on the forums. I'm going to leave for a while. Don't get too cocky, little ones. Some people let out a sigh of relief when they heard this. They could finally enjoy some peace and quiet. Sillin also left a letter for Guanfeng and said it to be sent at a fixed time. It would be best if Guanfeng could show up if there was an emergency. After all, Genya couldn't take care of everyone at the same time. It would also reduce some of the pressure on him. Sillin also contacted Shusag and his son and picked them up. When they returned to the space fortress, Shikai was already waiting for them. Other than Shurtang and Sha Ro, the rest of the researchers had been transferred to another space fortress. This one had already completed a round of modifications. Are you ready? Ayu moved a finger in front of the black box. Then let's begin. Chapter 320. Moon activated the black box, and with the help of the peripherals, a vortex began to form in front of the bastion. The edges of the vortex were dotted with nebulae, but the center of the vortex was pitch black. As the vortex grew larger and larger, the bastion looked like an ant in the face of it. The area they'd chosen was remote, with no habitable planets nearby. They didn't have to worry about being discovered. This vortex was much larger than the wormhole Genya had encountered all those years ago. Perhaps it was because this was the real thing, and the wormhole was just a trigger. As the vortex formed, Sillin and the others took their seats. They activated their shields and safety equipment, just in case something happened to them before or after passing through the wormhole. Sillin had fainted for a long time when he was forcibly transported here. Even Huimao couldn't avoid it. All right, let's go. Moon ordered, steering the bastion forward. This bastion had been built on Shikai's electronic planet, and Chip was in charge of it. Every part and interface was intricate and precise. Normal humans would need at least 10 people to safely operate this thing, but for Moon, Chip alone was enough. In other words, the entire bastion was under Moon's control. This was the decision Shikai made after his conversation with Chip. Chip told Shikai before he left, "No matter what, we 5 original robots will never betray the Shi family." That was the reason Shikai was willing to hand over control of the bastion to Moon. Perhaps Shikai didn't trust Moon, but he trusted Chip. Right now, there were only a handful of people inside the space fortress. Sillin wheezed the Shur siblings Shusag and his son, Shikai and so on. The rest of the researchers had been evacuated a long time ago, and only the robots remained. These robots wouldn't move until Shikai gave them the order. The bastion headed toward the center of the vortex. As it got closer and closer to the wormhole, Shusag and the others couldn't stop their hearts from racing. When Sillin went to find Shusag, the guy was still asleep. When Sillin told him about his plan, Shusag's first reaction was that he was still dreaming. After all, someone suddenly said, "Let's go. I'll take you to another galaxy to live the life you want." For someone who'd been through so much and dreamed of breaking free from the shackles of nobility, Sillin's words were like seeing holy light. After slapping himself a few times, Shusag circled around the house and confirmed with Sillin. Then he summoned Tesoro, who was still in class at school, back to his room. Shusag was very interested in the world of hunters Sillin spoke of, and Sillin needed a few helpers. Shusag and his son were without a doubt the perfect candidates. When Shusag notified Tesoro, his teachers and classmates weren't surprised by his abrupt departure from class. But they didn't know that Tesoro was really going to leave this time. Shurtang and Sha Ro were looking forward to a new life. Although they didn't know what the situation was like on the other side, they were certain that it was better than the one they'd been in. On the other side of GL, Sigma was staying on the Rank D planet where Sillin had disappeared. It was the only one left on the planet, along with the instruments and equipment on the planet. Back in the underground base, he had Lovag's guardian beasts to keep him company. Now, even the Lovag beasts were gone. Ever since Sillin and Huimao left, he was the only one left on the planet. Sigma tried to repair the equipment, but found that it couldn't be fixed in a short amount of time. All the settings were messed up, so he had to repair them to kill time. His heart of glass had shattered a long time ago. At the time, the underground tunnel was almost completely drained of energy, and the connection nodes were in serious disarray. The machine language, radiation caused by Huimao before he was sucked into the tunnel, had nearly paralyzed all the electronic equipment inside the tunnel. Come to think of it, Huimao was the main culprit. Of course, no one else knew about it. Today, Sigma was quietly repairing its equipment and playing some cheerful music. Otherwise, it would have felt lonely since it was the only person on the planet. Suddenly, Sigma sensed a familiar signal. The music stopped abruptly, and Sigma confirmed the signal's authenticity. Then, it screamed and ran out of the underground tunnel, arms waving. When Sigma saw the space-time vortex forming in the sky, the familiar signal grew even stronger. It knew who the signal belonged to. It would never forget it even after 1,000 years. You. The blue band on Sigma's face flickered like an expectant heartbeat. When the space-time vortex had expanded to a certain size, a space bastion emerged from it and slowly approached the planet. Once the bastion was out of the vortex began to fade away. Whis. Sigma cried out in pleasant surprise. In addition to Yu's signal, it received Huemao's signal as well. This was a great surprise for Sigma. Sigma, I'm here to pick you up, Yu said excitedly. Yu. Sigma's thrusters roared to life, and an opening opened in the bastion's hull for Sigma to enter. The two brothers who had only met each other after 1,000 years were waving their arms and circling around each other. Shikai felt like crying when he saw the robot fly into the bastion. This was Sigma. His ancestors could only see Sigma through images. But now, Shikai was seeing Sigma for real. No one interrupted the brothers' reunion. After a quick scan, Huimao turned to Silin and said, "There's no signal from Cheto, and there's no one else on the planet." However, there was a monitor not far from the planet that was constantly monitoring the situation on the planet. Fortunately, because of the space-time vortex, those monitors will be affected and work abnormally. Silin suspected that there were monitors on the planet, so he told Huimao to interfere with their signals. Now that Sigma had been picked up, and there was no one else on the planet, Silin ordered you to take the bastion and find a place where there was no one watching. Silin needed to understand what had happened in the League of Stars during the 2 or 3 years he was gone. The League of Stars' media was a bit scattered, but Silin was able to get a general idea of what was going on. Silin knew that there would be chaos before he left, but he didn't expect it to be this big. Almost the entire League of Stars was affected, and the situation was complicated. The Galactic Alliance was now divided into several parts. The political, military, and other major families were involved in a reshuffle that hadn't ended just yet. The League of Stars was no longer the same League of Stars as before. The smaller forces had a hard time surviving in this chaos, so some were absorbed, and some merged to form new organizations. Right now, Silin was only concerned about the 6th Division, no matter what the politicians and strategists were plotting. Sigma was in a very low mood after the reunion with you. Only 2.5 of the 5 brothers were left, and Chip was only half of them. Shikai didn't know what to do. Although he wasn't the one who did all those stupid things, he was still the head of the Shi family. He had to shoulder all the responsibility. To Shikai's relief, Sigma wasn't as scheming as Moon. Just like he knew, Sigma wasn't as scheming as Moon. Since Shikai was his master's descendant, Sigma would treat him well. "Where's Cheto, Sigma?" Silin asked. Shikai and the others were carrying the translation device Silin made, so they could understand the language Silin was using right now. Sigma's mood dropped even further when the topic was brought up. Cheto has left the 6th Division. He left Vanguard after the 6th Squad changed hands. The 6th Division changed hands. Silin hadn't expected this to happen. Yes. Due to the beginning of the Great Chaos, some small hunter regiments were absorbed by Vanguard, and the Tenbi squadrons under Vanguard were reorganized accordingly. The current commander of the 6th Division is a member of the A Squad. The original commander, Shoten, has been transferred to the A Squad, and 2 new lieutenants have been replaced. However, due to an internal conflict, Cheto left with Diaz and Asha. Rikulab went home, and he left with Dr. Murnichi Tico. The other familiar faces seem to have left one after another, but since they were only a minority and the entire 6th B Squadron was in the midst of reorganization, we didn't bother with them. Those who wanted to leave have already left. Did Ji Feng give any explanation for my disappearance? Silin asked. No. Part of the reason Yudi and the others left was to search for you. I don't know anything else, but I can contact the 6th Division's base. Cheto was the one who told me the rest of the information. Can you contact Cheto? Yes. Wait a moment. Sigma quickly pulled himself together and contacted Cheto. The two robots had their own unique way of contacting each other. Back then, Cheto had told Sigma to contact him if Sillin and Huimao returned. It didn't take long for Sigma to contact Cheto. In the video, Cheto was dressed in sportswear. No one knew where he was. The usually expressionless Cheto smiled brightly when he saw Sillin and Huimao. His eyes were bright and full of life. He was already rushing over after receiving Sillin's current star map coordinates. Shikai stared at the brightly smiling man in the video and asked a little hesitantly, "Is that Cheto really a robot?" "Yeah, he's a robot. He's very similar to Sigma and the others," Sillin said. Cheto had learned more emotions now, and he was able to express them like a human. Shusag and the others' jaws nearly hit the floor when they learned the truth. They really couldn't tell which part of Cheto looked like a robot. Moreover, when Sillin and the others were talking to Cheto, it didn't feel like they were talking to a robot at all. It was like they were old friends. "What do you plan to do next, Sillin?" Sigma asked. Sigma and Moon shared the same thought when they learned that their master was long gone, and that their brothers and sisters were either dead or crippled. They would stay here and observe the situation for now. If Sillin and the others were to return to the Mist Bodhisattva Empire, they would follow them. The black box was in their hands, so they could go back anytime they wanted. Shikai also said that he would stay here for a while. He wanted to learn more about this star system, and he was very curious about Cheto. He hoped that he could learn something from his interaction with the Origin robots. Sillin thinks for a moment before saying, "Can you contact Jifeng for me, Sigma? He told you how to contact him, right?" He did. Sigma contacted Jifeng, but Sillin told it to send him an encrypted message first. Meanwhile, on planet ZJ-100, Jifeng was holding a meeting with the leaders of the A Squad. Suddenly, his communicator rang with a message. Jifeng didn't mind it at all. He only checked the message after he was done talking. But after reading the encrypted message, Jifeng couldn't stay calm any longer. He abruptly rose to his feet, left the meeting room, and went to his personal lounge to contact Sigma. Jifeng was very happy to see Sillin in the video. Sillin didn't hide the fact that the Mist Bodhisattva Empire was located in another star system. Sillin knew that Jifeng wouldn't provoke the Mist Bodhisattva Empire, unless he was an idiot. The Mist Bodhisattva Empire was an entire empire. It was an entire empire, a whole entity. If they hadn't taken care of their own side, they absolutely couldn't afford to let the Mist Bodhisattva Empire take advantage of their weakness. If the Mist Bodhisattva Empire intervened forcefully, not even the Vanguard would have an easy time. In fact, they might even face annihilation. It was only after the situation in the League of Stars was stabilized that he could make contact with the Mist Bodhisattva Empire. Sillin didn't say too much about his life on the other side. Jifeng didn't think that Sillin would be able to live well in an unfamiliar and huge empire ruled by nobles in just 2 or 3 years. That being said, Jifeng's attitude towards the Mist Bodhisattva Empire was exactly as Sillin had predicted. He wouldn't make contact with them for now. That being said, Jifeng was very happy that Sillin was able to bring back such big news. He had high hopes for Sillin in the first place, and now that Sillin had returned, Jifeng planned to give Sillin the 6th Division's captain position or transfer Sillin back to the A Squadron. Sillin turned down Jifeng's suggestion. According to the information I've gathered, the current 6th Division is no longer the 6th Division of the past. My old squad has either disbanded or left. Even if I were to return now, I'd probably have a hard time getting along with my current teammates. So, Jifeng waited for Sillin to say something. That's why I want to apply to form the 11th B Squadron. Jifeng raised an eyebrow when he heard Sillin's words. A moment later he smiled and said, "All right, I agree. Your old base is perfect for the new 11th B Squadron. The 6th Division has already established a base on another planet. The old base is just a backup." Why? Sillin was puzzled. That base was pretty good. What was the point of not going to another planet to build a stronghold with such a good base? Jifeng looked meaningfully at Sillin. "You'll have to ask a certain person or an inhuman." Sillin looked at Sigma. Sigma turned its head away and pretended to communicate with Huimao, but the blue bars on its face kept glancing at them from time to time. Sillin had a feeling that the certain person Jifeng was referring to was Yudi, and the inhuman was definitely Sigma, Cheto, Shuecho Miantuan, and the Lovag beast stationed at the base. How much money do you need? Let me be clear. The situation is chaotic right now, and everyone is short on funds. The amount we can give you is limited, Jifeng said. Then let's not talk about that. I'm sure some people in the regiment will have objections to the establishment of the 11th B Squadron. You can handle it, Commander. Don't worry. Just do what you need. I'll take care of the regiment. Give me a list of the funds you need, and I'll transfer them to you. After the call ended, Jifeng lay on his recliner with a smile on his face. Don't disappoint me, Silin. Hui Mao was the happiest when he learned that Silin was going to form a new B Squadron. It was his own B Squadron, which meant that it was completely his territory. He was the landlord. By the time Silin told Moon to pilot the Bastion to the planet where the underground base was, Jifeng had already ordered everyone from the 6th Division to evacuate. In fact, there weren't many people left in the first place. After Sigma, Silin, and the others left, the residents of the base were constantly harassed. The entire base was like a mischievous hand, teasing them from time to time. For example, some people were locked inside for several days due to the malfunction of the passageway door. The walls of the toilet would move, and there would often be some very strange sounds, etc. Some people were so teased that they almost had a nervous breakdown. Both Sigma and Moon were overjoyed to be back on this planet. Shikai, on the other hand, was finally able to see his ancestors' handwriting. Hui Mao was so happy that he ran around and played with the Lovag beasts who came out to greet him. So this is a new life. Shusag spread his arms and looked forward to the coming days. Then he glanced at his son, who was staring at everything around him with glowing eyes, and slapped the back of Tesoro's head. What are you thinking about? Oddly enough, Tesoro didn't respond to Shusag's slap. He simply stared at the base rising from the ground. After a long time, Tesoro finally spoke up. I can fly a fighter too, can't I? Shusag chuckled and slapped the back of Tesoro's head again. You're still too young. You're not even as good as Sharo. Tesoro was about to retort when Silin turned to them and said, Go pick a room. This little guy will take you there. Yeah. A little Loag beast hopping around Silin waved its pincer legs and called out to Shusag and the others to catch up to it. While Silin, Moon, Sigma, and Shikai were setting up the base, a spaceplane flew toward them. Chapter 321. It's Cheto. Hui Mao, who was rolling around in the middle of a herd of Lovag beasts, ran toward him. The incoming spaceplane wasn't small, but Cheto was the only one inside. The cabin door opened, and Cheto walked out in his sportswear. He looked like a free traveler returning to his hometown. Cheto smiled when he saw Hui Mao, who was a lot fatter than he remembered. Long time no see, Cheto. Hui Mao jumped onto Cheto's shoulder and patted him with his paw. Not bad. Did you level up? Amen. I modified it by absorbing a couple of rare metals. Cheto scratched Hui Mao's chin. Hui Mao tilted his chin and allowed Cheto to scratch it. Then he pointed at the spaceplane behind Cheto and asked, Where did you get this? I robbed it, Silin answered calmly. Cheto was driving a small spaceplane when he left the 6th Division, but he ran into some well-equipped robbers along the way. That was why he robbed them without hesitation. Oh right, this is for you. Cheto took off the ring on his finger. It was the ring Hui Mao and Silin had given him before they left. It was the one he got from Osculos. No need. Silin said he'd keep this for you. Meow meow. At first, Hui Mao was going to give the subspace ring to Cheto. He often traveled with Silin, so he could just use Silin's ring. However, Hui Mao's tongue twitched when he saw it. The ring was filled with precious metals, energy blocks, and fish biscuits of Hui Mao's favorite flavors. It was obvious that Cheto had collected the rare metals and minerals over the past 2 or 3 years. The fish biscuits were bought while he was wandering around. You really are my blood brother, Cheto? Hui Mao laughed foolishly while holding the ring. Cheto. Blood brother? Silin and Sigma, who were setting up the base, walked out of the building. When they saw Hui Mao squatting on Cheto's shoulder and laughing like a fool, Silin turned to Cheto and said, Welcome back. Sigma also rushed over and gave Cheto a hug. For the past 2 days, Sigma's mood had skyrocketed. and the waves on its face hadn't stopped for a single moment. It even hummed a little tune from time to time. Not far away, Shikai's eyes lit up when he saw Sillin high-fiving Cheto in a very natural manner. This robot was a bona fide original robot. It was a robot that was very close to a human. However, Shikai had no idea how far this robot's mind could stretch. He would slowly figure it out as he spent more time with it. Staying here was indeed the right choice. There were some rare metals on Cheto's spaceplane. Sillin needed to build a starship, and there were a lot of materials in the base. But no one would complain about having too many rare minerals. Before this, Sillin hadn't made a move because the higher-ups of Vanguard hadn't officially agreed to form a newbie squadron. It was only yesterday that Sillin finally received Ji Feng's official notice, and was ready to officially summon the people who had left. Cheto had returned just in time, and he knew how to contact Yudi and the others. It saved Sillin a lot of trouble. Beaver and Yudi had been guests of the 3rd B Squadron all this time. In fact, they had been guests of the 3rd B Squadron for almost 2 years now. Ever since the 6th Fleet's major reorganization and the departure of many familiar teammates, they had been guests of the 3rd B Squadron. However, they were quite popular in the 3rd B Squadron because they were both technical talents. Falvey, the commander of the 3rd B Squadron, had expressed the intention of recruiting them into the squadron, but the duo had never expressed anything about it. After receiving Sillin's message, the two of them immediately packed up and left. Their departure was swift and decisive. Falvey laughed in exasperation when he saw the situation. The 3rd B Squadron was one of the strongest B Squadrons in Vanguard, and the conditions they had offered the duo were good enough. Who would have thought that they couldn't even compare to Sillin's words? After Sillin contacted the people, Yudi and Beaver were the first to arrive, followed by Carrie, Badao, and Xiaoshang. Meichi Tiko had returned alone. Lycrabe, no, the 4th young master of the Shi family, Shi Huajing, hadn't returned with them. Lycrabe has some family matters to attend to, so he can't join the construction of this fleet, Tiko said with a smile. While speaking, she took out the little rabbit from her pocket and allowed it to play with Huimao and the others. The little rabbit hadn't changed at all after almost 3 years. It was just as small as before, but everyone knew that it was special, so they didn't pay it any mind. I learned from Cheto that he's the 4th young master of the Shi family right now. It's a rare opportunity to take back his power during this time of chaos. Later on, Sillin secretly communicated with Shi Huajing and established a partnership. After all, no one could stand alone in this situation. Isolation would only make one's situation worse. Adding a partner was like adding a helping hand, a bargaining chip to gain a firm foothold. The last to arrive were Diaz and the others. After the 6th Division was reorganized, Diaz, Asha, his newborn son, Tang Qiuqiu, Qifeng, and Xueqiu left the 6th Division together. After all, the people Tang Qiuqiu trusted the most in the 6th Division were Diaz and Sillin. Since Sillin wasn't here, Diaz was naturally the one who followed him. After their spaceplane landed, the first person to rush out was a ball-like fatty with a fair complexion. These gluttons have all grown fat. This was Sillin's first thought after he returned. Xueqiu had grown a lot. In the past, he could be carried on Tang Qiuqiu's back, but now he was almost as tall as Sillin when he stood up. After he rushed out of the hatch, he rolled into a ball and rolled back to where Sillin and the others were. It didn't take long for him to join Huimao and the Miantuan. Right now, Tang Qiuqiu was already a young girl. Of course, if you ignored the big sniper rifle she was carrying on her back, she would make people feel closer to her. As for Qifeng, he was trying his best to keep a straight face, but the tail wagging behind him made it clear that he was actually very excited inside. Old man they. Tesoro pointed at Qifeng, who was wagging his tail. Tesoro had been surprised when he first saw Ba Dao. Then one by one they appeared out of nowhere. Now this kid who was wagging his tail so blatantly, Tesoro still wasn't used to it. After all, in the past, everyone was busy hiding their differences, afraid that they would be treated as an anomaly. But after he came with Sillin, he realized that there was no need to hide anything. It didn't matter what you looked like as long as you had the ability. This was a place where strength spoke. Call me father. Shusag slapped Tesoro on the head. Shusag had trimmed his beard and hair, And he wasn't dressed as sloppily as before. Shusag didn't look much older than Dias now. Right now, they still had to rely on the translator to communicate with these people. That being said, they were confident that they would be able to truly integrate into this group. The more people there were, the livelier it was. For example, when they heard Carrie's familiar roar early in the morning, the gluttons who had pried open Carrie's storage cabinets and disappeared without a trace. Now that the planet was their territory, they could run anywhere they wanted, and Carrie wouldn't be able to catch them. Tang Qiuqiu was getting along well with Xiaorou, and Ba Dao and the others were sparring with Shusag from time to time. Sillin knew that Shusag was a powerful fighter, which was why Ba Dao and the others couldn't win against him in the first place. While Shikai was busy building robots, he couldn't summon Moon to his office. Moon, on the other hand, kept Sigma away from Shikai's research area for fear that Shikai would dissect Sigma. In the end, Shikai had no choice but to ask Cheto for help. Cheto didn't turn him down. Helping Shikai build robots was the same as helping Sillin grow his B squadron. Since he was a robot himself, Cheto shared some of his thoughts with Shikai every now and then. Shikai learned a lot from his conversations, and although his new robots didn't have much of an independent mind, some of the details had been greatly improved, and their stealth and combat power had been increased. Everything in the base was progressing in an orderly fashion. When the new team emblem was unveiled, the base held a celebration to celebrate the official birth of the 11th B Squadron, and the reunion of everyone. There was still a long road ahead of them, and it would be difficult and full of setbacks. But so what? This was the path they had chosen, and they had to climb it to the end. The B Squadron's main starship was built under the guidance of Sillin, Moon, Sigma, and Shikai. The first batch of engineering robots from Shikai's robot factory were sent to work as labor. As long as they had enough energy, these robots could work day and night with astonishing efficiency. On the day the starship was finally completed, the new Freedom Starship was as sharp as a blade, and it made everyone's blood boil. Huimao had left a paw print on the part of the ship where the Vanguard insignia and the B Squadron's serial number were displayed. Next to the cat's paw were Miantuan and Xueqiu's footprints. Although these footprints were insignificant compared to the entire starship, the trio was very satisfied. Hunters belonged to the universe, and when the Freedom Starship was completed, the long-awaited first voyage was about to begin. Sillin wanted to search for the logbook Genya mentioned, but now wasn't the time. The situation at Sector S was unclear, and he needed more time to investigate. Since Sillin's return, there were a lot of people he couldn't contact like Mo Hung, Lung, Knight, and Ci Jincheng. There wasn't much information about them either. Moreover, Sillin's new fleet had a lot of things to do, so he had to push them back. There were some things that Sillin needed to retrieve from the current 6th Division. For example, Enji's lab that contained the parasite samples. Most of the samples had been moved when they first arrived at the base, but there were still some records in the lab. Some of them were Enji's things, and some were Komunidin's notes. Sillin was going to retrieve all of them. Since Enji belonged to the 6th Division, Sillin had to negotiate with the 6th Division's current commander, Simon, if he wished to retrieve Enji's things. Since Simon was sent from the A Squadron, Sillin thought that he should start with the A Squadron directly. Therefore, Sillin contacted Nada. Since Komunidin and Enji were both deceased, Nada had always taken care of Sillin. When he learned that Sillin wanted to retrieve Enji's things, Nada expressed his approval. In Nada's mind, the only person who could perfect Komunidin's parasitic code was Sillin. When he contacted Nada, Nada told Sillin that the current 6th Division commander, Simon, was someone the A Squadron had sent to train. He probably wouldn't be easy to talk to, so Nada told Sillin to be prepared. To be honest, Sillin knew that a person who grew up in the A Squadron would always have a sense of superiority when they stood in the B Squadrons. It was unavoidable for them to be arrogant. Sillin contacted Simon and informed him beforehand, but he didn't say what he was going to do. All he said was that he was going to the 6th Division's starship to retrieve the things he left there. "I don't like that guy no matter how I look at him," Huimao said after Sillin and Simon ended the call. Simon's attitude as if he was giving Sillin face, even if he said one more word, made Huimao very unhappy. Sillin flicked Huimao's ear but didn't explain. "Pack up and get ready to depart." Got it. Hui Mao ran out of the B squadron to notify the others. In reality, he was mainly there to notify the Miantuan and Xueqiu to bring the food. The current commander of the 11th B squadron was Silin, and the vice commander was Yudi. Due to the small number of people, there was only one vice commander. When the time came to recruit more people, the vice commander position would increase as well. There were robots guarding the base, and the base itself was a gigantic mechanical intelligence entity. There was no need for anyone to supervise it all the time, so everyone boarded the starship. Moon and Sigma chose their own resting spots, and Shirtang, Tico and Shikai each had their own laboratory. The starship was equipped with molecular synthesizers, medical devices and more. Silin thought that these were all things that he couldn't live without. Many of the warehouses on the starship were empty, but hunters could easily fill them up after going out for a stroll. Silin, Moon, and Sigma were responsible for piloting the starship. In fact, either Moon or Sigma could pilot the starship on autopilot. They just didn't want to stay here alone. Silin sat in the cockpit, reading a book and skimming through the League of Stars' media outlets. There were some limitations, but it was enough to get a general idea. When the starship set sail, a wave of cheers erupted inside the starship. This was their first voyage as a new team, so Carrie and Xiaoshang ran around the starship like lunatics. During the voyage, Shusag sparred with Carrie and gave the others some pointers. Everyone shared their experiences with one another, and as a result, they learned a lot of practical combat techniques from each other. Shirtang's body was much better now that he had been treated. His hair was growing again, and he didn't look as sickly as before. Sometimes, Shirtang would learn a thing or two from Shusag when he sparred with Carrie and the others. Right now, Sector Z's forces were all over the place. Silin's group did run into people from other forces during the voyage, but they all laughed when they heard that it was Vanguard's 11th B Squadron. Everyone in the League of Stars knew that Vanguard had 10 B squadrons, not 11. So what was up with this 11th B Squadron? It had to be a disguise. That was why no one thought much of it. If it was any other B squadron in Vanguard, they might be a little nervous, but not this one. It was a lone starship, and it was marked with Vanguard's insignia 11. Wasn't that bullshit? Therefore, everyone thought of it as a joke. Vanguard's 11th B squadron only had one starship. When the joke got out, some people were hoping to see Vanguard's reaction. But no one from Vanguard made a move. Every B squadron in Vanguard had been notified of the new 11th B squadron's existence. Therefore, even though they thought it was ridiculous and that this so-called 11th B squadron was a disgrace to Vanguard, no one dared to voice it out in public. Right now, the 6th Division was occupying a rank A planet. It was a very good planet, and it was one of the forces they had robbed when the League of Stars first descended into chaos. Building a stronghold on this planet was a good thing for many people, especially those who had been harassed by the underground base. Outside the 6th Division's stronghold planet, on the main starship, Simon asked the person beside him, "Is the 11th squad here yet?" "Soon. Judging from the signal we received just now, there's about 15 minutes left." "Amen." Simon sat down on his chair. "Remember my original plan?" "Yes." Since Silin said that he wanted something from the starship, Simon wasn't going to let Silin enter the planet. His so-called reception would be outside the planet. This was a show of strength. Simon wanted to let Silin know that he, Simon, was the one in charge of the 6th Division, and not the old Shotten. Moreover, Simon wanted Silin to see the gap between them. How strong could a new B squadron be? Simon knew that people were treating Vanguard's 11th B squadron like a joke, and he believed that Silin was a complete disgrace to Vanguard. There was no way he would treat him nicely. That was why Simon didn't even plan to let Silin enter his home. Simon's plan was good, but 15 minutes had passed and he still hadn't seen a single starship. He had even lost track of the other party. "What's going on?" Simon looked at the person beside him in dissatisfaction. "Commander, we lost track of the enemy 5 minutes ago. There's no signal or phalanx." Simon frowned. Did something happen to the 11th squad? Another 5 minutes passed, and Simon felt that something was wrong. However, the person in charge of surveillance told him that the enemy had disappeared without a trace. Why would they suddenly disappear? Commander, look. One of them pulled Simon's attention to the screen. On the display screen, a starship gradually appeared in their line of sight. Moreover, it was right next to their main starship. The insignia on the starship was rather dazzling to Simon. It was invisible. And it was completely invisible. This meant that the 11th squad had arrived a long time ago. It was just that no one on their side had noticed them. If the enemy hadn't shown up on their own, the 6th Division would have continued to be blind. A full 5 minutes. 5 minutes wasn't even enough for some people to squat in the toilet, but 5 minutes was more than enough for the 6th Division to endure a destructive attack without even knowing who the enemy was. It was as if a knife had been placed right next to their necks, and yet they were completely oblivious to it. This was indeed a show of strength, but it wasn't from the 6th team to the 11th team. It was from the 11th team to the 6th team. Chapter 322. Sorry for the long wait. It's been a long journey, so we only rested for 5 minutes after we arrived. I'm sure Captain Simon will understand, right? Silen's voice entered his ears. Right my ass. Simon looked like he was constipated. It wasn't just because the enemy had stayed right next to their starship for 5 minutes without being noticed, or because Silen's words made Simon want to flip the table. It was because the voice had come from their starship's communicator. Most importantly, none of the technicians had connected to the communicator until Simon had given the order. So, how did this voice come from his communicator? There was only one possibility. The enemy could control their communicator. Other than the communication system, Simon didn't know how many other devices the other party could control on his starship, but what happened just now had made him extremely vigilant. The more he thought about it, the more powerless he felt. Was he trying to take them down a notch? Simon felt as if he were a monkey in a circus, and he thought he was doing a good job. He was a member of the A Squadron after all, so he quickly adjusted himself. At the very least, he was back to normal on the surface. The technicians around him were still staring at him in disbelief. Trash. Simon cursed inwardly. Ahem. It's nice to meet you, everyone of the 11th squad, Simon said after regaining his composure. Simon's words snapped everyone out of their daze, and they scrambled to connect the two starships. Simon had regained his composure, but when he saw the leader of the squad walking toward him, he lost his composure again. When Silen contacted Simon at the base, he was still a brawny, honest-looking young man with brown hair. Now, however, he was using his original appearance. Allow me to formally introduce myself. I am the current commander of the 11th B Squadron, Silen. This is my original appearance, Silen said to Simon, who looked like he was about to collapse. When Silen contacted Diaz and the others, he used the appearance he had when he was in the League of Stars. But after they arrived and set sail, he reverted to the appearance everyone in the Mist Bodhisattva Empire was familiar with. This was his true appearance, and it was the only way his body could be in peak condition. The full activation of the AI chip could allow Silen to exist in various forms, turning him into a different person. However, Silen still preferred his original appearance, which was the most natural. His body's energy consumption was the lowest, and his condition was maintained at its peak. I've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time. Simon clenched his teeth. Of all the things he could do, he chose to transform. Was this another show of strength? He had black hair, black eyes, and a tanned complexion. He was a healthy and sunny person, just like a young man who had just stepped out of his house and stepped into the outside world. But when he thought about Silen, he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He was obviously a kid who was much younger than him, but she couldn't see through him. She couldn't see through him, and she couldn't tell what he was thinking from the expression on his face. The original members of the 6th Division were looking at him strangely. They were wondering why Silen hadn't shown up yet, but now he was wearing a completely different face. Then he looked at the people behind Silen. Asha was the only one who had stayed behind to take care of the children, and everyone else had come out with him. Simon scanned the group and noticed that half of them were people he knew, but the ones he didn't look like they were ordinary people. In the end, Simon's gaze landed on Shusag. The middle-aged man was flirting with a female technician next to him like a ruffian. He looked old and frivolous, but Simon's instincts told him that he was probably the strongest among the group of people he didn't know. In fact, he might even be on par with some of the seniors in the A-team. How could someone like him be willing to serve a young man like Sillin as a foot soldier? Due to the consecutive setbacks, Simon didn't reveal his original plan. What he wanted most right now was for Sillin's group to leave his territory as soon as possible. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to rest easy. Especially the way that frivolous middle-aged man looked at his starship like a bandit looking at a fat sheep. Don't embarrass yourself, old man. Tesoro elbowed his father, who was flirting with a few female technicians, and said in a low voice. Shusag curled his lip and sighed. I'm thirsty. Little brats won't understand. Carrie and the others heard Shusag's words and shot him a we understand look. Then they huddled together and started chattering away, even laughing at the same time. Tang Kakikyu chewed on the candy in her mouth. She wanted nothing more than to stab these old perverts with her gun. She was no longer the ignorant kid she used to be. She was familiar with Carrie and the others, so she knew they were talking about something indecent the moment she heard those familiar giggles. She slapped away Chiefing, who was wagging his tail at Carrie and the others with a curious look on his face. Listen to my ass. It's not suitable for children. Tang Kakikyu snapped. Simon led Sillin's group to the area where the engineers and technicians were located. Enji's workshop was located. This was because Sillin had set up multiple passwords for this workshop later on. Without the password, it would be very difficult to enter unless the workshop's door was forcefully pried open. Ever since Simon took over the 6th Division, he hadn't paid attention to the engineers and technicians at all. All he did was issue an order and check the results. He didn't care about anything else. Moreover, most of the engineers and technicians who stayed behind were old people, and they all had a kind of reverence towards Enji and Sillin. That was why no one forcefully pried open this workshop. Standing in front of the workshop, Sillin flashed a friendly smile at the familiar faces around him and keyed in the password. The workshop that had been closed for almost 3 years was finally open. Cheto, Moon, and Sigma helped Sillin copy the data and load the specimens Sillin deemed important into the transport crate. Carrie and the others stayed outside the workshop. It would be troublesome if there were too many people in the workshop. Carrie and the others reminisced about the past and told Shusag and the others about their time in the 6th Division from time to time. The starship they were so familiar with no longer belonged to them. However, Carrie and the others couldn't help but lament for a moment. Even if it was a familiar starship, it was still scary without familiar teammates. It was nowhere near as warm and comfortable as the new 11th squad was. Simon left after leading Sillin's group to their destination. It was more than enough for AB Squadron Commander to make it this far. Although it was completely different from his original plan, Simon didn't care about it right now. Right now, all he wanted to do was stay as far away from these people as possible. Simon felt incredibly uncomfortable whenever he saw them, especially when he was in front of Sillin. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was inferior to Sillin, even though they were clearly about the same height. Was his aura inferior to Sillin's? Simon refused to admit it. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Although Simon had left, 2 vice commanders came to him after hearing the commotion. Carrie didn't recognize either of them, but they were probably new members of the 6th Division. Moreover, one of them wasn't originally a member of Vanguard, and he had only become a vice commander of the 6th Division after the 6th Division was annexed. The most eye-catching thing was that this vice commander was a beautiful woman with a hot body. Seeing the man and woman walking over, Carrie and the others only stared at the beauty and whistled, their eyes filled with ridicule. Tang Qiuqiu touched the shaft of her spear. She really wanted to just stab these embarrassing bastards and be done with it. Yo, so you're from the new 11th B Squadron, aren't you? Are all of your team members here? The man said with obvious sarcasm. He emphasized the word everyone when he said that. He was implying that this was all the new squad had. What a joke. Carrie and the others continued to stare at the beautiful woman, as if they didn't hear what the man said. Tang Qiuqiu and Sha Ro were chatting quietly, and Qifeng was poking his head around to look at Sillin's workshop. No one paid any attention to the man's sarcasm at all. It was like punching cotton. The man didn't respond. The man was about to say something else when the beautiful woman Carrie and the others were paying attention to walked up to him with a smile on her face. Shusag's eyes were glued to the long, white legs that were swaying in his direction. The beautiful vice commander looked at Carrie and the others. We could have been teammates, but you all left when I took over. Oh, so you're the one who took over the squad. Yudi, who was leaning against the wall of the tunnel, looked over. He flicked away the tail of the restless chameleon above his head that was interfering with his vision. The beautiful woman smiled. What I don't understand is why you're willing to follow Sillin from the very beginning instead of staying in the 6th Division, or any other squad. Even if you can't become a vice commander with your abilities, you should at least be treated a lot better, right? In terms of experience, you guys don't lose to Celine. In terms of ability, a lot of teams have heard of your names. This time, no one responded to her. Carrie and the others were too busy admiring the beautiful woman to care about what she said. Yudi was annoyed by the miantuan on top of his head. He knew that the creature was bored, so he grabbed its tail and swung it towards the workshop where Sillin and Huimao were. Remember, don't cause trouble. The beautiful woman wasn't angry that no one was paying attention to her. She looked at Shusag, whose eyes were glued to her long legs. It would be easier to start with him. If Simon were still here, he would never let her mess with Shusag. After all, she wasn't as observant as Simon. Is this a newcomer? The beautiful vice-captain walked toward Shusag with a perfect smile on her face. But before she could even take her first step, she stiffened and froze. This was because a hand with a specialized finger bone that had turned into a knife appeared in front of her. She didn't even see the person's movement or react before the hand appeared in front of her. The others were the same. Those who were stronger like Carrie and the others could see a few afterimages, but the weaker ones couldn't even see them. They felt as if the person had teleported to another place. Regardless of whether they could see the afterimages or not, no one could say for sure that they could avoid the 5-finger blades. For a moment, there was only silence. The new faces behind the man and woman all pointed their guns at them, but they were stopped by the man. He didn't want to make the atmosphere any worse. Plus, he didn't think Shusag had any intention of harming them. Moreover, the man was clearly very strong. He wasn't sure if any of his people could survive a real shot. The 5 long finger blades glinted with a cold light. They were placed there casually, but those who were familiar with the distribution of blood vessels in the human body would notice that they were pointed at the beautiful vice commander's carotid artery, subclavian artery, aortic arch, axillary artery, and trachea. Not a single finger was pointed at the woman's heart. Pointing at the heart would be seen as an act of extreme contempt. After all, they were all members of Vanguard, so Shusag had to save them some face, right? He wondered what kind of expression the beautiful woman would make if she knew what Shusag was thinking. Should she thank him for saving her face, or should she be angry at his behavior? Tico looked at Shusag and smirked. As a doctor, she naturally understood the deeper meaning behind his actions. It seemed that this new member of the team was quite capable. That wasn't all. Shusag pressed himself against her like a drunken scoundrel, but he didn't flinch in the slightest. At the same time, his other hand slid down the beautiful vice-captain's waistline and across her exposed thigh with a finger knife that wasn't completely specialized. It was just enough to make contact with her skin and send a shiver down her spine, but it wasn't enough to cut through her skin. It was a very provocative move. Tang Kakikyu covered her face with her hands. As expected, everyone in this team is a bunch of scum. I'm really worried for Dia's 2-year-old son. I don't know what kind of person will be raised in a place full of scum like this. I hope Diaz won't vomit blood when his son grows up crooked. Right now, all Tesoro wanted to do was find a hole to crawl into. Ever since the old pervert left the Mist Bodhisattva Empire, he had turned from a hidden pervert to an overt one. He was flirting with a woman in front of his son and a couple of minors. Dad, where's your integrity? Did you get pickled with the vegetables? Tang Kakikyu, Sharo, and Tesoro cursed at the same time. Old vagabond. Carrie's mouth was wide open. As expected of this uncle. Look at how he's flirting. TSK, this is so fucking exciting. The woman who was staring at Shusag turned pale. It wasn't because she was angry at Shusag's behavior, but because his eyes gave her goosebumps and chills. She couldn't describe the feeling, but it could be summed up in one word: contradiction. She was smiling frivolously and making frivolous remarks, but everything turned blurry under the gaze of those eyes. It was hard to tell what was real and what was fake, but it was also very oppressive. She wanted to say something, but she realized that even a single word was difficult to say. The two finger blades pressed against her neck were giving off a bloody chill. This man is too scary. Flirting? Games? No, none of those. Only the person involved knew that under the exaggeration, there was a chill that made people tremble. Shusag moved closer to the woman's ear and whispered, "That's a cheap trick. Use a better one next time. You need to be tactful with your words, or you'll be the one to suffer." After that, Shusag put away his finger blades and returned to his original spot. He rubbed his hair and pulled out a cigarette, but Tesoro snatched it away. "No smoking here." "Fine, I'll smoke when I get back." Shusag saved the cigarette from Tesoro's hand and put it back in his pocket like a treasure. Yudi gave Shusag a thumbs up. "Not bad." Shusag cocked his head to the side and gave him a half-hearted smile. "Sigh, life has worn me down." As they were talking, Sillin had finished packing up and noticed the strange atmosphere outside the workshop. Without saying anything, he waved at Carrie and the others. "Come on, let's head back." Shusag turned around and blew kisses at the young women around him. Tesoro kicked him before he finally followed. After Sillin and the others were finally gone, Simon asked the man and woman, "What do you think?" Neither of them said a word. They really didn't know what to say. They hadn't even tested the other party's true strength yet, let alone Sillin. With Shusag as an example, they didn't dare provoke him any further. Simon didn't get angry even though he didn't get an answer. He lay on his chair and stared at the ship flying further and further away on the screen. On the other hand, Sillin. After retrieving Enji's belongings, they temporarily placed them inside Sillin's workshop on the starship. They were all precious treasures. "Where are we going next, Commander?" Carrie rubbed his palms together. Right now, Sector Z was pretty much divided up. As a newly formed fleet, they had nothing to gain from this place. Moreover, there were too many forces in Sector Z right now, and it was easy for conflicts to arise. Many people would take advantage of the situation and loot it. Right now, the best way to replenish resources and gather more information was to leave Sector Z and head to another sector. It was impossible for them to go to the top 3 sectors. Those places were even more troublesome than Sector Z. Moreover, the 10 free trade sectors were all strong places. Comparatively speaking, only the lagging sectors would give them more room to perform. The question was, where in the lagging sectors should they head to now? Sector S used to be a prison sector, but now there were basically no prisons left. The great upheaval had caused the people inside the high-level prisons to become incredibly popular. Right now, the 3 major black forces were fighting each other, so it was inconvenient to interfere. They couldn't search for Jenya's logbook either. Right now, Sector V was clamoring for independence, and they were clamoring to form some freedom alliance or something. It would be asking for trouble if they went there. After a brief discussion, everyone agreed to head to Sector T. It was also the place where Sillin first encountered Hui Mao. Sector T was full of alien beasts, so they went there to stock up on meat and make some money while they were at it. However, when they just entered Sector T, Sillin's group ran into a transport ship. The transport ship was parked quietly, and the only sound it emitted was an intermittent distress signal from time to time. Other than that, there was no other activity. "What's going on?" Sillin asked Ayu. Ayu spread his hands. "The ship isn't responding to our communication signal, and there's something wrong with the ship's power system. I can't get any more information, but there's one thing I'm sure of. If there are people inside the ship, then none of them are alive right now." Chapter 323. Not a single person is alive? Sillin asked with a frown. The gravity inside the transport ship is currently 0, and the oxygen content is extremely low. The energy fluctuation detection in the engine compartment shows that it is in a closed state. As for the life signal, I haven't detected any signal activity yet. Of course, there might be survivors, but the chances are very low, Moon replied. Also, the power system and main control system are all shut down, so I can't get more information. If we can enter the transport ship, I might be able to get more information. Shall we go? Sillin thinks for a moment before walking out of the control room. Me, Cheto, Shusag, and Moon will go check it out first. Carrie, get ready. I'll contact you if I need you. Roger that. Shusag walked into the equipment room and took out a protective suit, a breathing mask, a gun, a wrist blade, and a pair of gravity boots. Although some of the equipment wasn't exactly the same as the ones he used in the military, they were more or less the same. Hey, old man, be careful. Don't embarrass yourself too much, Tesoro said from a short distance away. Shusag put on the gravity boots and shot Tesoro a glance. You think I'm as weak as you? After putting on his equipment, Shusag reached out and rubbed Tesoro's hair until it was a mess. Then he ran away before Tesoro could lose his temper. Asha couldn't help but shake her head. What an awkward father-son relationship. Both Sillin and Shusag had to wear protective gear, but Cheto and Moon didn't have to. Moon looked very excited. Unlike Sigma, he wasn't someone who could stay put for long. He loved adventures and trying new things. As the starship approached the transport ship, Sillin, Cheto, and Shusag stood on the bridge of the starship. Moon had already flown out and was standing right next to the transport ship's cabin door. The blue strip on his face flashed as he tried to decode the door's controls. Screech, very soon the door opened. Just as Moon had said, the power system inside the transport ship had either malfunctioned or been shut down. Everything was dark. Sillin made a gesture, and the three of them jumped into the open hatch of the transport ship. The gravity boots stuck to the floor of the transport ship, allowing them to stand steadily. Holding back Huimao, who was about to rush inside, Sillin said, "Don't move. Stay here." Huimao flicked his ears and reluctantly squatted on Sillin's shoulder. He looked left and right while observing the situation inside. "We'll go in first," Sillin said to Yudi and then walked inside. "There are so many dead people inside," Huimao said. It had already detected the situation at the entrance of the passage not far away. "Sillin, do you want me to hack into the main power system and turn on the power?" Moon asked. "No, don't turn on the power first. Check to see what's wrong with the power system. Don't leave any traces." Sillin's intention was to let you see if the power system malfunction was accidental or man-made, but he couldn't leave any traces of intrusion. Got it. Ayu was very confident in his abilities. As they walked deeper into the passage, they saw the things Huimao was talking about. The dead bodies, blood clots, and spurting blood inside the passage were all floating in the air due to the weightlessness. There were also some blood stains and bloody handprints on the walls of the passage. They were all left behind by the dead. "Who are they?" Shusag asked. "They look like normal employees." "I don't know." Sillin looked at the attire of these people. He didn't find anything iconic on their clothes, but judging from the material of their sailor suits, the forces behind them weren't small. "Try not to touch the blood droplets and blood clots. Keep them in their original state," Sillin said to Shusag and Cheto. A pause later, he turned to Huimao and emphasized, "Don't leave any claw marks." "All right." Huimao retracted his claws and raised his front paw to show Sillin the little pads on it. "Is this okay? These people." Shusag glanced at the floating body next to him and pointed at a knife wound. "It's a very professional knife wound." It was easy to tell how skilled a person was with a knife just by looking at the cut. Judging from the dead body in front of him, Shusag could tell that the person who killed them was a professional. There was no hesitation in their movements. After walking deeper into the passage, Ayu opened a door and entered the control room of the main cabin. There were even more dead bodies floating here, and some of them looked like they were in shock and disbelief. Perhaps they hadn't reacted in time to the slaughter at all. Most of them weren't holding any weapons, and judging from the genetic analysis, they were all ordinary people. "What do you see?" Sillin asked Shusag. "It was a one-sided massacre." I can see that the Slayers are a well-trained and well-equipped team. They didn't even leave any obvious traces behind. Plus, Shusag pointed at a person floating not far away. That person should be someone powerful, right? Sillin looked at the direction Shusag was pointing at, and saw a person floating there. However, the fatal wound on this person wasn't a knife wound, but a gun wound. The genetic analysis showed that this person was a rank A genotype. The League of Stars used gene rank as the standard of measurement, so they couldn't let their guard down against a rank A genotype even if they hadn't gone through any professional training. That was why the killers didn't engage in melee combat. Instead, they used a sniper's bullet to end this person's life. The bullet's penetrative power was so strong that it almost blew the person's heart out of his chest. However, the bullet didn't have any other distinguishing features. They couldn't tell what kind of gun it was, so it was obviously disguised. They were all wearing the same flight suits, but the Slayers were able to tell which of them had A-rank genotypes. This proved that the Slayers were very familiar with the distribution of the people on this transport ship. They knew which ones were stronger, and which ones were weaker. Then they came up with the most labor-saving and time-saving plan. Do you know how to write a report? Sillin looked at Shusag. I'm good. I used to write a summary report after a mission in the army. Let's go back and sum it up. Sure. After walking around the ship, they saw that the storage of the transport ship had been emptied. Judging from the residue, the storage was filled with high-quality energy blocks, some rare metal ores, and some high-end equipment. Anyone would be pissed if they lost something this valuable. I wonder who the unlucky bastard is, Huimao said slowly. He was prepared to come here to get some benefits and save up some money, but he didn't get anything at all. How disappointing. The problem is, for something this valuable, they would definitely send strong guards to escort it, right? Where are they? Shusag looked around and didn't see any guards around. Most of the people hovering outside were normal employees. There were a few decent ones, but they were the minority and didn't seem to be part of the security force. There's one over there. Cheto pointed at a passage. He could tell that the person there was much stronger than the people in front of them. The passage Cheto pointed at was connected to the storage, and there was a spiral staircase at the turning point that led to the next floor. The turning point led to the control cabin and the storage, and the bathroom. Other than the guard in the passageway, there were two other guards floating at the turning point. Their bodies were also riddled with gunshot wounds, killed in one shot. Do you need reinforcements, Commander? Carrie asked through the communicator. Not yet. Sillin was afraid that more people would leave more traces. He didn't want anyone to know that they were here. The guard's rest area should be up there. Cheto stopped Shusag just as he was about to walk up. It's poisonous. What? Shusag pulled his foot back. There's very little of it here, but the higher we go, the thicker it gets, Cheto said. It is. It's fatal to the human body once it reaches a certain concentration, Moon confirmed. Sillin and Shusag checked their protective suits before unfolding their breathing masks to cover their entire heads. There were no gaps between them at all. Let's go. The higher they went, the thicker the poisonous gas became. When they went up the stairs, they discovered that the door was closed. However, there was a small crack on the side through which the poisonous gas leaked out. Ready? Moon looked at Sillin. After receiving a ready gesture from Sillin, he opened the door. What he saw was nauseating. Due to the erosion of this atomized poisonous gas, those who inhaled it or came into contact with it through their skin would have their nerves rapidly necrotic. This necrotic phenomenon would gradually spread throughout the body, and the muscles and fat on the body would expand like bubbles, making the whole person look like a malignant tumor. This room was so full of tumors that it was impossible to tell a person apart. The small crack on the door was made by these people with guns before they died, but because of the effect of the poisonous gas, they could only make a small crack. They could not persevere at all. The two who died at the turning point must have escaped the poisonous gas by going to the bathroom. They didn't know that a sniper was waiting for them there. Most of these people are rank A genotypes, Sillin said after a quick inspection. Coupled with the armor and clothes around them, he could confirm that these people were the guards of the transport ship. But why were all the guards gathered here? Can you find the leader of these people, Moon? Sillin asked. I don't know, but I'll try to restore their communication records. There are a lot of tampered records in this transport ship. The killers had tampered with the surveillance records and some of the ship's communication records. This meant that some of their information might have been exposed. If they could restore this information, they could figure out more about the killers. The culprit was obviously an expert in this field. With the combined efforts of Moon and Huimao, they were able to restore most of the information, but some had been erased too thoroughly and couldn't be recovered. Still, with these restored records, they could learn more about the inside story. Judging from the communication records, these guards had been summoned. The person who could summon them must be the person in charge of the guards or the captain of the transport ship. The person who summoned them was notified through the communicator in the control room, Moon said. But when we came from the control room, there was no one there at all. Shusag remembered this very clearly. He was still puzzled at the time. Sillin thinks for a moment. Let's go back and take a look. Moon continued to restore other information with Wheeze. Also, give me the list of the people on this transport ship. Can you get that? If not, I'll do it myself. Of course we can. Huimao and Moon answered in unison. After closing the door at the top of the stairs again, Sillin returned to the control room and found the control room. Logically speaking, the captain should be here, but he wasn't. He didn't see anyone who looked like the captain anywhere else. Sillin didn't look for any of the more secluded corners. Could the captain have hidden himself somewhere? No, he's here. Cheto drew a circle in the air with his finger. He should be here. However, he's been decomposed. The elemental ratio here is obviously different from the outside world. I compared the elemental types and amounts in a human body, and it's very close to the amount of 2 people. Shusag felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of person could be so ruthless? Not only was he slaughtered, he didn't even leave their corpses intact. 2 people. If one of them is the captain, then who is the other? Why would they go to such great lengths to make these 2 disappear? Sillin was puzzled. It just so happened that Moon and Huimao had recovered some of the deleted and altered member records. Here, this is the captain you've been talking about. A picture and some words appeared on Moon's projection. Sillin didn't recognize the person in the projection, and Cheto didn't have any information about him. Show me the others' profiles, Sillin said. Moon switched the projection, and the images swayed one after another. Wait, Sillin suddenly said. Move 2 to the front. Yes, this is the one. The person in the projection was the captain of the transport ship's escort team. He looked pretty ordinary, and he didn't stand out in a crowd. But Sillin remembered him. It had been a few years, but Sillin still remembered him. The first time Sillin met Aflon Duance and accepted his first mission as a hunter of Vanguard Division 6, he had fought 2 of Aflon's bodyguards. The person in the projection was the one Sillin had sent flying. In other words, this transport ship was actually the Duance family's cargo. However, the cargo was hidden very well, and it was obvious from the crew's attire that they didn't intend to expose themselves at all. If someone else had come here, they definitely wouldn't have known that this was the Aflon family's cargo. Robbing the Aflon family's cargo? Which side did they belong to? If one of the people who were dismembered was the captain, then the other person had to be this bodyguard. Do you know them? Shusag asked. It could be the Duance family. It's just a guess. A great family? Is there some kind of conspiracy going on here? There's no way he wouldn't have made preparations without my understanding of the Duance family's captain. However, a one-sided massacre like this, even though he was prepared, can only mean that there's a spy in their ranks again. Let's gather some more information and leave. Then why are we gathering this information so carefully? Shusag pointed at the floating people and beads of blood, and then at the projection Moon had projected. Since we're already here, we can't let this trip go to waste. We can't let ourselves be stained with blood, and we need to fish for more chips. If we have the chance, we can sell this chip. That's not easy. Shusag sighed. Can't help it. Those old farts are more cunning than the last. We have to be prepared if we want to fish for money from them. Otherwise, we might get bitten in the back if we try to be a good guy. But let's investigate here. How much can we get in return? I can't say for sure. That depends on how much information we gather. Got it. Shusag made a got it gesture with his hand and went to examine the wounds and other details of the victims. Different gene levels corresponded to different wounds and possible opponents, as well as an estimate of the killer's combat strength. Shusag was very familiar with all of this. Although he had been out of the military for a long time, he still retained some of his professional habits. It would be much easier for him to organize the report when he returned to the starship. Sillin went to the engine compartment to take a look. There were obvious signs of human intervention there. Someone had entered the engine compartment and cut off the main power supply, causing the transport to stop sailing. They had also interfered with the main power system and changed the gravity inside the transport ship. Before they left the transport ship, Sillin asked Moon to set up a surveillance program to see who would come back to the ship after them. After returning to the starship, Sillin held a small meeting and told Yudi and the others not to tell anyone about the transport ship. Otherwise, they would get into trouble. Alright, that's it. Don't think about anything else. Sillin pointed at a planet on the star map. Our destination is this hunting planet. Let's go eat some meat. Alright, Xiaoshang. Let's see who can hunt the most prey this time. Carrie looked at Xiaoshang. Let's compete. I'm not afraid of you. I want to join too. Tang Qiuqiu raised her hands. Sillin ignored their small activities and went back to the lounge to lie down and take a nap. 5 minutes later, Sillin opened his eyes helplessly and looked at Huimao, who was pacing back and forth. What's the matter? Say it. Nothing. The gray cat stopped in its tracks and turned its head to the side, but it was obvious that it lacked confidence. Sillin pinched Huimao's furry ears and gently pulled them up. Really? No. All right. Sillin let go of Huimao's ears and stared at Huimao, watching as the stupid cat's tail became stiffer and stiffer. Finally, Huimao could not take it anymore and spat out a red gem. The ruby was the size of Sillin's pinky nail. It was as red as blood. Under the light, it reflected a strange light that could make people intoxicated. There was a fracture on the ruby, as if it had fallen off due to an external force. Right now, Weeze's ability to measure value was growing stronger and stronger. At the time, it had spotted the ruby from a pile of floating flesh and blood, and swallowed it whole while Sillin wasn't paying attention. It thought that this ruby was worth at least 100 bags of fish biscuits. But Sillin said that it would try to keep the inside as it was, so Huimao felt guilty and was restless. Looking at the ruby in his hand, Sillin put it into a small box. Keep it. If it's not useful, I'll sell it and buy you cat food. Hearing Sillin's answer, Huimao was very satisfied. Huimao quickly curled up in a circle next to Sillin and began to sleep. It still had to hunt when it woke up, and it needed to conserve its energy. Sillin closed his eyes, but he did not really fall asleep. He was thinking about a problem. According to the shape of the ruby, the one Huimao got should be on a woman's ring, and it should be very valuable. But on that transport ship, Sillin did not find anyone that matched the member information that Moon had sorted out. There were less than 1/10 of the women on the transport ship, and they were all ordinary staff. Who was a woman who could wear a ruby of this level? Chapter 324. Following Dias and Carrie's suggestion, Sillin selected 3 hunting planets. They were more familiar with hunting planets, and they knew which planets were more suitable for the squad's current situation. When the time came, they would choose the most suitable planet according to the current situation. There were 3 purposes for going hunting. 1 was to stock up on food, 2 was to get some good stuff to sell for money, and 3 was for everyone to get some exercise and practice. Due to the current situation, the main targets of hunting had changed a little. In the past, they mainly went for rare species, but now they mainly hunted for meat. After all, not many people like to eat nutrient pills and drink nutrient fluids all day long. Due to the current situation, the meat produced by the farms of the large financial groups was more expensive. Even so, the supply still couldn't meet the demand. Armies from all sides needed it. Hunters, on the other hand, were more inclined to solve the food problem themselves. Because of this, Fights between hunters often broke out on hunting planets after the situation became chaotic. Many people never returned from hunting planets. Some of them were killed by exotic beasts while hunting, while others were killed by other hunters. Before they left for the hunting planet, Scylla had asked Carrie to explain the situation of the hunting star zone to the newbies, and the things they needed to pay attention to once they arrived. During the hunt, not only would they have to face alien beasts that were more cunning than normal beasts, they would also have to be on guard against other hunters that were hiding in the dark. Since there weren't many people in the team, the demand for food wasn't high. Therefore, they chose a hunting planet with commercial value. Some of the exotic beasts there were more difficult to hunt, but their value was also much higher. Now that there were fewer people hunting these exotic beasts, their prices were gradually rising. For Huimao, this was undoubtedly a good opportunity to make some money. Scylla had asked Huimao if it wanted to visit the planet it used to live on, but Huimao had rejected it decisively. It didn't think there was anything to see there. Moreover, it had only been a few years since they left. It was too short. There was no need. In other words, there was still a difference in the minds of animals and humans. A person who had been away from their birthplace for a few years might want to go back and take a look, but this cat wouldn't. Right now, it only had eyes for exotic beasts waiting to be slaughtered. At first, Shusag was worried that Huimao would be traumatized by the idea of hunting exotic beasts, but he soon realized that he was overthinking things. The starship remained in space outside the planet. Scylla and the others took a spaceship to the planet, while the starship hid in stealth mode. There were still quite a few starships outside the planet. There was no need to collide with them. Sigma and Moon weren't with Scylla's group. They had other things to do. Sigma had set up a small indoor fruit garden on the starship for the sole purpose of enjoying the process. Now that it had followed Scylla and the others to a hunting planet, Sigma's goal was to grow all kinds of fruit trees that were highly nutritious and tasty. Once these fruit trees were planted on the starship, not only would Scylla and the others be able to eat fresh fruits, but they could also be made into nutrient fluids and used to make their own food and clothing. That was why Sigma and Moon had gone off to search for saplings and seeds. They would keep in touch with Scylla and the others until they had to leave. Moreover, Scylla had a feeling that Moon would be able to protect himself. The two robots might look harmless, but they were very destructive. Besides, Moon might be a robot, but he was smarter than some of the old guys. Scylla wasn't worried that they would be tricked. After collecting their equipment, Scylla and the others entered the forest. The exotic beasts they were looking for weren't here. Instead, they had to pass through the forest to reach the rocky area. The reason they started in the forest was because they were looking for meat in the forest. It was also a warm-up activity. Scylla's group was spread out in a specific formation. They would form groups of 2 or 3, and there was a certain distance between each group. However, if a group were to meet with an accident, the others would be able to rush over to their rescue. Moreover, this formation could also warn each other and form a relatively safe area. Scylla and Yudi were in a group. The Miantuan, the little chameleon, lay obediently on Yudi's shoulder. It was the weakest fighter in the team, so the Miantuan, who was always afraid of death, was especially obedient at times like this. In contrast, Huimao was bouncing left and right like an ADHD patient. Scylla told it not to run around and disturb the prey, so Huimao could only jump around Scylla's area, roll around and chew on some grass. If it sensed prey, it wouldn't need Scylla or Yudi to do anything. The others had already started hunting. What Scylla could hear wasn't the sound of gunshots, but the soft sound of bullets hitting the bones of the prey. The bullets and firearms used for hunting were different from the ones they usually used. The firearms were well silenced. There were transport robots transporting the prey onto the spaceplane, so all they had to do was hunt. What do you think about that incident? Yudi asked Scylla in a low voice. Knowing that Yudi was talking about the transport ship they encountered not long ago, Scylla answered, "I'm not sure yet. The transport ship should belong to the Duance family, but we have no clue who the killers are. After all, it's possible that anyone could have done it given the current situation. Those lunatics at Sector V, do you think it's possible?" Yudi asked again. Among Scylla's suspects, The people at Sector V were also at the top of his list. They were a bunch of lunatics. It was fine if you didn't mess with them, but once you did, it was very difficult to shake them off. Moreover, those people were bloodthirsty. They enjoyed the pleasure of killing. Judging from the terrible state of the transport ship, it was possible that they were the culprits. Ever since Scyllin killed the lone hunter Osculos, the people who were once suppressed by Osculos were now venting their bloodlust all over the League of Stars. According to Scylin's information, similar incidents had happened many times in the League of Stars already. However, Scyllin rejected this speculation later on. They're organized and planned. Also, they made the transport ship's captain and the escort captain disappear to cover up their tracks. If it's those people at Sector V, why would they do that? That's true. Also, the miasma gas doesn't look like something the people at Sector V would use. If it's them, I think it's more likely to be a bomb. It looks like you don't think it's them either. Scyllin looked at Yudi. Yudi sighed. Right now the entire League of Stars is like a shroud of mist. Some people look like they're getting along well on the surface, but who knows how many times they've fought each other behind the scenes. The military, the government, and the big families all have their own trump cards. The chaos might look sudden, but in reality, all parties were prepared for it since a long time ago. The signs were there even before you went missing, and even the tiniest spark could cause a great riot. It was only when Osculos, one of the star-rank hunters, was rumored to be dead that the chaos erupted. Scyllin suddenly remembered something. Where did the news of Osculos' death come from? I heard that it's from Sector V, or they wouldn't have attacked us so openly and declared that they've established a freedom alliance. Scyllin remembered that the only people who knew that he killed Osculos were Jifeng, Gaidar, and Azrael. The one who spread the news had to be one of them, or someone else. These people were all hoping to reap enough benefits from the chaos. It could be anyone. What's wrong? Did you think of something? Yudi asked. I'm trying to figure out who spread the news. The person who spread the news must be hoping that the League of Stars will fall into chaos. That's true, and they're using the thugs at Sector V to create chaos. If you were in my shoes, who would you suspect if you had to choose from Jifeng, Gaidar, or Azrael? Scyllin looked at Yudi. Yudi paused and looked a little serious. Do you know something, Scyllin? Scyllin didn't say anything and waited for Yudi's answer. Yudi thought carefully for a moment. He hadn't stopped collecting information since he left the 6th Division, and he had stolen a lot of information from a lot of forces during the chaos. He just hadn't told anyone about it. The news of Osculos' death was leaked by the leader of a violent organization at Sector V, but I don't know who told him. It was a fuse that caused the chaos that had been brewing in the League of Stars for a long time to erupt all at once. As for the people you mentioned, to be honest, any one of them is a possibility. If they really know the truth, they'll spread the news. Yudi didn't hold back just because Jifeng was the regiment commander. He told Scyllin his thoughts and the information he had gathered in the past, hoping that it would serve as a reference. After Yudi was done, Scyllin smiled. You've said a lot. It sounds like it wasn't easy to get all this information, is it? Then let me tell you something else. Osculos is dead. I killed him. Yudi nearly fell to the ground when his legs gave out. The Miantuan on his shoulder rolled on the ground before climbing back up to Yudi's shoulder in a hurry. Are you serious? It was because of Osculos that I left the base. That being said, I would have died a long time ago if Cheto and Whis hadn't helped me. Yudi stuck his fingers through his hair and scratched his scalp hard. Then he looked at Scyllin and chuckled. It looks like I'm following an amazing captain. A thought occurred to Yudi, and he added, Don't worry, I won't leak this information to anyone. Speaking of which, did the people you mentioned know about it? Yes. The duo analyzed the current situation for a moment. Then, Shusag sent them a message through the communicator saying that they had run into 2 heavily injured hunters. What's wrong? Carrie and Xiaoshang ran over to ask Scyllin. It's nothing. Yudi, you head toward the destination with Carrie and the others. I'll go check on Shusag. After informing Huimao, Scyllin ran toward Shusag himself. Shusag, Tezoro, and Ba Dao were in the same group. Since they weren't normal humans, they got along pretty well. Lying in front of the trio were two heavily injured hunters. Their bones were broken in many places, and their internal organs were damaged to varying degrees. They needed to be treated as soon as possible. Some of their injuries were caused by alien beasts, while others were caused by humans. It was the younger-looking man who helped his comrade over, and asked for help from Shusag and the other two. If it's not convenient for you to help, you can sell me some stimulant potions and nutrient pills. The young man took out a blood-stained debit card and slid his finger across it. The amount inside was displayed on the card. 100000. When Sillin arrived, he saw the young man talking with Shusag and Ba Dao about buying stimulant potions, nutrient pills, and some other healing medicine. At the same time, the young man was hinting to Shusag and the others not to think about killing them and robbing them. Though the two of them were heavily injured, a fight to the death might not end well for Shusag and the others. Sillin looked at the young man with an odd expression. What a coincidence. He wasn't sure if he was unlucky or overly lucky. Captain. When Ba Dao saw Sillin, he briefly explained what happened just now and the young man's request. They did have stimulating drugs and nutrient pills, but as a hunter he had seen too many deceptions. Ba Dao didn't know if he should just kill these two people and be done with them, or make a deal with them. That was why Shusag reported to Sillin and let Sillin make the decision. He didn't expect Sillin to come to him directly. Glancing at the young man on the ground, Sillin sat down on a piece of dirt nearby. Repeat what you just said. The young man repeated his request patiently. He didn't mention anything about their identities or the reason why they were in this state. As a fellow hunter, Ba Dao didn't ask for the details because he knew he wouldn't get any useful information even if he forced it. Yeah, Sillin replied noncommittally. How many stimulant potions and nutrient pills do you want? The young man was about to answer when he sensed something, and turned his head to look. He saw a fat cat with a sparrow in its mouth running towards him at a speed that did not match its size. It was even running and jumping from tree trunk to the ground, then to the trunk of another tree. It looked like the fat cat was in a good mood. However, because of this cat, the young man's words stopped abruptly. His face contorted into a grimace. Shusag and the other two, including the young man's companion, didn't understand why the young man looked like he wanted to shit when he saw Huimao running toward him with a sparrow in its mouth. His entire body stiffened. Huimao didn't look at the others when it ran over with the sparrow in its mouth. It jumped onto Sillin's shoulder and was slapped down by Sillin. If you want to play, go play somewhere else. Sillin knew Huimao well enough to know that the cat only caught the sparrow as a toy. If the sparrow was still alive, it would swallow it. If it was dead, it wouldn't eat it. The sparrow in Huimao's mouth was still kicking. Its wings, which were pinned down by the cat's teeth, didn't vibrate much, but it seemed to be alive and well. With the sparrow in its mouth, Huimao was about to go play on the grass when its eyes swept across the stiff young man who looked like he wanted to stuff his head into his pants. Suddenly, Huimao's eyes lit up. Meow. Aren't you the ghost butterfly kid who owes me 1,000,000 yuan? It emphasized the words, he owes me 1,000,000 yuan. Gue Dai Shichi roared in his heart. What the fuck? Why did I run into it again? Gue Dai Shichi lay on the ground and didn't say a word. He had already roared in his heart countless times. At the same time, he thought that if the cat was here, the kid had to be nearby as well. Seeing that Gue Dai Shichi didn't say anything, Huimao thought that he still wanted to deny it. So he told him about how Gue Dai Shichi owed Sillin 1,000,000 yuan for a bottle of stimulant potion and a nutrition pill. In less than 2 minutes, everyone knew that Gue Dai Shichi owed Sillin 1,000,000 yuan, and that he had been tricked. I've already paid back the money, Gue Dai Shichi said through gritted teeth. You did owe me anyway. Huimao ignored the sparrow that had already flapped its wings and ran away. He looked at Gue Dai Shichi and the people around him with glowing eyes. You want to buy potions again? Gue Dai Shichi didn't say anything, and the people around him were also unusually quiet. Shusag wanted to laugh. However, he felt that it wasn't the right time to laugh, so he held it in until the muscles on his face twitched. Since Gue Dai Shichi didn't say anything, Huimao asked Sillin. Sillin, are they buying potions and pills again? How much do they want this time? Let me calculate the price. Hearing Huimao's words, Gui Daishichi suddenly looked up at Huimao, then followed Huimao's line of sight to the person sitting on the dirt block. Silin. That's me. Silin nodded. You can't recognize me now that I've changed my appearance. Gui Daishichi felt that his luck had been very bad lately. When he decided to ask for help, he had thought of many scenarios and how he should approach the hunters, but he never thought that it would be this person in front of him. Silin looked different from before, but the way he spoke was very familiar to Gui Daishichi. Coupled with the cat, Gui Daishichi was sure that it was the person in front of him. Gui Daishichi had experienced that kid's character firsthand. He was definitely a scumbag. That cat was a scumbag too. Although Gui Daishichi looked like he wanted to puke whenever he saw Silin and Huimao, Shusag could tell that Gui Daishichi was a lot more relaxed than before. After all, they knew each other very well now. Meanwhile, Sigma had found a few good seedlings, but they were surrounded by thorny bushes. Although it and Moon tried to fly over, the thorny bushes were so thick that they completely surrounded the seedlings. It would take a lot of effort to get them out. Sigma was about to start when Moon stopped him. What's the point? Moon raised an arm and pulled back his fingers, turning his palm into a cannon. Boom. When the dust settled, all the thorny bushes were gone except for the seedlings at the center. Although they were still entangled by some thorny vines, they were a lot easier to deal with than before. See, it's so much easier this way. Not far away from them, the hunters who thought they had hidden themselves well were also pondering whether they should make a move or not. The two robots before them seemed to be even harder to deal with than those ferocious beasts. Should they make a move or not? Before they could make up their minds, however, Moon pointed his cannon at the bushes they were hiding in. After a brief moment of silence, Moon turned to Sigma and said, "Come on, let's keep looking for seedlings and seeds." Sigma. Ayu's actions kept Carrie and the others busy for a while. Chapter 325. Gui Daishichi was in a bad mood. He had been cheated of another 2 million. 2 million. Normally, he could buy a box of that potion for 10,000, but the situation had forced him to do so. Gui Daishichi glared at the cat, only to find that the cat was looking at him suspiciously. Gui Daishichi was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. I just didn't write an IOU, right? With my reputation, are you afraid that I will go back on my word? Gui's continued to grow suspicious. There were 2 cards under its paws, one with 100,000, and the other with 300,000 or so. Let's round it up and call it 300,000. So Gui Daishichi, you owe a total of 1,600,000. If you go back on your word, I will let the entire League of Stars know about your debt. Huimao said with a serious face. Gui Daishichi felt his wounds open again. He wasn't sure if it was because of his anger. He wiped his face and said to his partner, who was focused on recovering, "Swallowtail, if you see these 2 in the future, stay away from them." Swallowtail didn't even bother to look at them. Today, he finally realized that Vanguard had such an outrageous person. In the past, the military thought that hunters were all money-sucking vampires. Swallowtail thought it was only natural, but now that it had happened to him, he had personally experienced the feeling of grinding his teeth. Of course, Gui Daishichi, who had been cheated twice, had experienced it even more. What a scam! Just then Silin's communicator rang. It was Carrie. "Captain, we don't need to go to the rocks. The exotic beasts there are all running out of their caves in fright. It saves us the trouble of chasing them away." "Are there a lot of them?" Silin asked. "Not bad. Enough for us to make a fortune." Carrie seemed very happy. "If there are too many of them, just take a step back and do what you can." "Got it." After the report, Carrie informed the others. Yudi also gathered everyone. They couldn't be too scattered when dealing with these exotic beasts. They had already made a plan before this, so when Yudi said it, everyone naturally started to move. Each of them rubbed their palms together and prepared to hunt. Money, it was all money that was running towards him. Carrie could already see the shining horn on the head of the exotic beast running at the front. It shone like gold, causing Carrie to almost drool. The horn of this kind of exotic beast had a faint fragrance that could expel pests. It also had a calming effect on the human body. It was very popular among the rich when it was made into ornaments or pendants. Good quality ones could be sold for 5 digits. However, the shells of these exotic beasts were too hard, and they were very fast. They liked to live in groups in rocky areas, and they had violent temperaments. Many hunters had suffered at their hands. Carrie switched the bullets, pulling down the magazine for hunting small beasts and switching it to a magazine specifically for dealing with medium to large armored exotic beasts. Their guns were 2-in-1, so that they could react faster in such a situation. Bang! A bullet accurately shot into the eye of an exotic beast charging at them, exploding right where its eye was. It was just enough to blast the exotic beast's brain into smithereens, but still keep the horn on its head intact. Carrie looked at Tang Qiuqiu not far away. He wasn't the one who fired the shot. While he was still aiming, Tang Qiuqiu fired the first shot, accurate as always. It seemed like Tang Qiuqiu's marksmanship hadn't fallen behind in the past 2 to 3 years. Her standards were still the same. After Tang Qiuqiu fired the first shot, the others opened fire one after another. Meanwhile, Shikai's robot would take the opportunity to cut off the horns of the dead exotic beasts, to prevent the most valuable parts from falling into the hands of others. After the hunt was over, Carrie and the others would return to deal with the exotic beasts they had killed. After all, they didn't have the time to do such delicate work, and the exotic beasts that kept coming at them with their pincers wouldn't give them the chance to do so, either. Ba Dao knew that the hunt had officially begun, so he couldn't stay there any longer. Sillin had the 3 of them join in the hunt, while he left Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail to watch over them. After all, the 2 of them were in a critical period of recovery. If no one was there to watch over them, it would be very easy for them to be ambushed. Even a small exotic beast could take them out. Is that okay? Let's leave Sillin alone, Shusag asked after he left with Ba Dao. Sillin is very strong. Plus, with Lord Wheezing around, they should be fine as long as they don't run into a large group, Ba Dao replied. Shusag had never seen Sillin fight before, and neither had he seen Huimao use his claws. He knew that the cat was no ordinary person, but he couldn't imagine just how strong it was. Swallowtail was a little surprised that Sillin would stay behind to watch over them, but when he looked at Guidai Shichi, he realized that this was the kind of expression the guy should have when he was in a dungeon, so he wasn't surprised at all. Swallowtail couldn't help but change his opinion of the man who was a lot younger than he was. Plus, Vanguard and Lon Hudi weren't enemies. Hey Sillin, are you still in the 6th division? What's your position now? Guidai Shichi asked. Before Sillin could answer, Huimao raised his chin and declared cockily, "We're the 11th squad now." The 11th B squadron? Doesn't Vanguard only have 10 B squadrons? Guidai Shichi was puzzled. We have 11 now. Sillin just built them, Huimao said proudly. Why are you so cocky? It's not like you built them, Guidai Shichi taunted. Guidai Shichi thought that Huimao would explode in anger, but nothing happened after a while. Huimao ignored Guidai Shichi. His attention was drawn to something else. The cat's ears were twitching, and the long hair inside his ears were vibrating as well. Like a radar, they reflected the situation around them. After moving his ears, Huimao suddenly said, "Sillin." Sillin had obviously noticed it as well. The commotion seemed to have spread too far and exceeded Sillin's estimation. Noticing Sillin and Huimao's unusual behavior, Guidai Shichi looked at Swallowtail. Swallowtail was also looking puzzled. Neither of them had noticed anything out of the ordinary. Perhaps it was because of their injuries that their senses had decreased. Sillin sensed activity in the distance. It was the direction where Carrie and the others were hunting. However, Sillin had a bad feeling about it. Sillin had always trusted his instincts, so he immediately contacted Yudi and the others and told Carrie and the others to give up on hunting and return to Vanguard immediately. When they heard Sillin's words, although they were a little reluctant to part with the prey in front of them, they immediately retreated according to Sillin's orders. What's wrong? Guidai Shichi looked at Sillin. Sillin didn't answer directly. Instead, he injected Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail with 2 potions. You. Silen's speed was too fast. Guidai and Swallowtail had no time to react. Perhaps it was because they had let their guard down in front of Silen that they couldn't stop Silen. Swallowtail was shocked. Even though he had let his guard down, Silen's movements were too fast. Even if he hadn't been injured, he might not have been able to dodge. Without any warning, he couldn't have guessed that Silen would make such a move. Don't worry. It's just a potion to help you recover faster. It's much more expensive than the ones we gave you before. Swallowtail carefully felt his body. The potion really did make him feel a lot better. Even his breathing was a lot smoother. Guidai face twitched. What now? Ask for more money? Boom, boom, boom. There were 3 consecutive noises. The noises didn't come from this direction. Judging from the distance, they were clearly shaking. Guidai shuddered. An earthquake? Silen stepped on the trunk of a nearby tree and leaped up to the top. He looked into the distance. A flock of startled birds had already taken to the sky. They were flying in his direction. Silen turned on his communicator and said to Yudi and the others, "Get back here now. Don't fly. Go straight to the forest." At the same time, Silen had Shikai send more robots to the area. He didn't want to be delayed if they ran into a beast horde. Realizing the urgency of the situation, everyone sped up. Silen told Huimao to connect to the spaceplane and wait for Carrie and the others to arrive before leaving. Meanwhile, Moon and Sigma were flying toward the city as well after they received word of what had happened. "Was that an earthquake just now, Moon?" Sigma asked while flying. "I don't know. It didn't look like a natural earthquake." Sigma was puzzled. Before coming to this area, he had studied the map. This wasn't an earthquake zone, so why would an earthquake of this magnitude happen? Even when it fired its cannons earlier, it didn't cause such a huge commotion. The group of people rushing toward the spaceplane had to avoid small exotic beasts that were running around in panic every now and then. They also had to avoid trees and bushes in the forest. There were no such obstacles in the air, but Silen had warned them not to run in the air. They couldn't fly even if they were on hoverboards. Therefore, it was really depressing to watch the transport robots fly freely in the air, while they had to avoid so many obstacles on the ground. Carrie shot an exotic beast that pounced at him and shouted, "Why are there so many exotic beasts? Did we run into a beast horde?" "It's a beast horde. Why are they all coming this way?" Yudi looked at the growing number of exotic beasts around them. These were the ones that were lucky. They didn't have much attack power, and there were still large exotic beasts chasing after them. No wonder Silen had told them to retreat. The epicenter of the earthquake had come from 3 different directions in a triangular formation. If they had been any slower, they would have been surrounded by these beasts, and it would have been a lot more dangerous than it was now. Seriously, why is there an earthquake at a time like this? Xiaoshang grumbled. "Stop complaining and get back to the spaceplane." Yudi had just finished saying that to Xiaoshang when he heard 3 pops. One of them was only half a meter away from him, while the other 2 came from Xiaoshang and Carrie. After the 3 pops, 3 people wearing stealth equipment appeared and fell to the ground. All 3 of them had their heads blown off. Shusag was about to react when he saw a person appear in front of him and Tesoro. A slender blade pierced through his neck, and a figure appeared behind him. The person was holding a blade, and the blade was only 10 centimeters away from him. The blade beside Shusag's neck gave off a hair-raising aura as it pierced through the person's forehead. The person in front of him was none other than Silen. Silen and Huimao had rushed over as soon as they sensed something was amiss. It was just as he thought. Someone was trying to kill them. Shusag's eyelids twitched uncontrollably. If it weren't for Silen, either he or Tesoro would have been seriously injured or killed on the spot. These people were just too good at concealment, and the beast stampede had given them the perfect opportunity to conceal their auras. "Someone's here. We're under attack." The others reacted quickly. Screech! Shikai released a strong interference electromagnetic signal. This electromagnetic signal could cause the invisibility equipment on those people to malfunction. As a robot maker, he knew stealth equipment all too well, and he carried an anti-stealth device with him out of habit. Thanks to Shikai's interference signal, Everyone could see the intruders even without the aid of a device. It wasn't very clear, but it was enough. Snowball, who had always looked like a naive bear, swelled to a height of 5 meters, long fangs protruding, and its eyes changed. Its silver pupils were like a world of ice and snow, cold and cruel, making it look very sinister. Tang Qiuqiu threaded a strap under Snowball's armpit and tied it securely around its shoulder. This way, she could stay on Snowball's shoulder steadily, and at the same time, borrow Snowball's protection to look for opportunities to shoot the figures that appeared due to the interference. Meanwhile, Qiuqiu was cleaning up the brainless alien beasts around him. He swung his arm and sent a couple of them flying. Judging from his strength, there was no way they could survive. Qiuqiu might look clumsy, but he wasn't slow in the slightest. Even with his speed, Tang Qiuqiu was able to find opportunities to shoot at the intruders. Not only that, she was also able to land a headshot on every one of them. This kind of teamwork was probably something they had done many times before. Their teamwork was excellent, and they reacted quickly to the ambush as well. Shusag was busy taking care of the assassins around him. He had been careless earlier because he didn't pay attention to the beast horde. At the same time, this experience also made him understand that this was a new world with a new set of rules. Since he had decided to lead a wonderful life in this new world with Tesoro, he had to accept the cruelty of this world as soon as possible and integrate into it. This wasn't the Miss Bodhisattva Empire. This was a place where strength mattered the most. Every assassin here had gone through countless life and death battles, so their physical and mental fortitude were far superior to the average person's. Even Shikai's invisible robots couldn't keep up with the assassins' movements once they discovered their targets. Even if they could keep up with the assassins in terms of raw speed, they couldn't do anything about it if their minds couldn't keep up. Therefore, they had to rely on their own strength to solve the problem. Pay attention to Qifeng, Shusag said to Tesoro. Leave the others to me. Pay attention to Qifeng's movements and claws. Shusag had been paying attention to Qifeng since a long time ago. It wasn't because Qifeng wasn't human like them, but because of Qifeng's claws. In battle, Qifeng's claws would always strike from the most precise and effortless angle. It wasn't a deliberate move, but an instinctive one. This was what shocked Shusag the most. Not even he could claim that his claws were better than Qifeng's. Moreover, Qifeng might look small, but even Shusag had no choice but to dodge his explosive power. He hoped that Tesoro could learn something useful from Qifeng. Qifeng aside, Shusag had also paid attention to Tang Qiuqiu. The two kids fought almost entirely on instinct and instinct. What kind of environment did these two children grow up in? Talent. Shusag had always believed that talent was only a decoration. The key was still the person. It was like a blade. No matter how sharp it was, it all depended on who wielded it. Only those who wielded it well wouldn't waste it, and those who didn't know how to use it would only be a waste. Cheto was the only one who fought barehanded. Of course, Shusag and his kind didn't count. Their claws were their own weapons. But Cheto fought barehanded. When Carrie looked over, he just happened to see Cheto twisting the gun barrel of a killer's hand like a fried dough twist, and removing the killer's entire arm. There wasn't a single drop of blood on Cheto. This is too fucking violent. Although Shikai's interference was effective, it was only limited to those who wore stealth equipment. There were also some killers who could turn invisible to begin with, so they wouldn't be affected by the electromagnetic interference. Fortunately, there were only a few of them. After Shikai's interference forced the killers to show themselves, Sillin turned his attention to the invisible people and eliminated them first. Ever since the chip inside his body was fully activated, Sillin's constitution had improved by leaps and bounds. It wasn't obvious from the outside, but both his speed and perception were far better than before. Sillin could see the invisible people as well. He couldn't see their complete appearance, only their silhouettes. But that was already a lot better than the others. Sha Ro could see the invisible people because of her special constitution, but her abilities were limited. She couldn't react in time even if she could see them. There was still a huge gap between her and the professional killers. While Sillin was dealing with the killers, he also took care of her. The girl had grown up very quickly. Back in the Miss Bodhisattva Empire, she used to be very restrained. But now, she was becoming more and more open. She had learned a lot of skills from Shusag and Carrie, and every experience was a rare opportunity for her and Tesoro to grow up. Sillin could already imagine what they would be like when they grew up. Bang, bang, bang. Every time a gunshot rang out, an assassin would fall. It might be 1 or 2, or 3 or 4. Yudi and the others weren't the only ones surprised. The killers were just as shocked. It was already shocking enough that they could kill one person with a single gunshot, let alone several. It was a small white gun with a hexagonal muzzle, but to the killers, every gunshot was like a horn calling for their lives. Some assassins wanted to get rid of Celine, the most troublesome opponent, but they realized that they couldn't lock onto Celine at all. They couldn't keep up with Celine's movements either. Celine's speed was too fast, and it was very difficult to make a move on her, be it close combat or ranged combat. Wielding the terrifying white gun in one hand and the thin blade in the other, Celine kept reaping the lives of the killers. It had been almost 3 years since they last saw each other. This was the first time Carrie and the others saw Celine fight after Celine left. Celine's ability had far exceeded their expectations. Such a person actually didn't join the A-team. If he had joined the A-team, he would definitely have a place there. Huimao helped left and right, and when he saw that someone was in a difficult situation, he would go over to help. The speed of his claws was not inferior to Celine's, and because his body was small and gray, he didn't even make a sound when he ran. 2 killers were caught off guard by Huimao's fatal claws. The number of beasts increased. Not only Celine and the others, but the killers were also affected. Celine took this opportunity to shoot the remaining killers dead. He turned to Huimao and said, "We's clear the way. Retreat." Celine didn't dare to let everyone fly in the air, because he wasn't sure if there were any killers or other hunters around who wanted to harm them. To be on the safe side, it was better to retreat through the forest. A loud cry resounded through the forest. The birds in the sky that were approaching them were so startled that they lost their formation. Some of them even changed directions and flew in different directions. Within the forest, the exotic beasts ahead seemed to have encountered something terrifying. They retreated one after another, opening up a path. Some of the exotic beasts directly fainted from the shockwave. Shusag really wanted to cheer for the kitten that was responsible for all of this. How domineering, he thought to himself. Now that the killers were no longer a threat, and the alien beasts were no longer a hindrance, everyone was able to retreat a lot faster. At the same time, the spaceplane was also flying toward them. It wasn't until they entered the spaceplane that everyone relaxed a little. However, they didn't dare to be careless. They weren't out of danger yet. "Moon Sigma, bring those 2 to me," Celine said through the communicator. After injecting Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail with the antidote, Celine had rushed to Yudi's side instead of guarding them. If he hadn't, the situation would have been completely different. Moon and Sigma had already arrived at where Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail were, so Celine ordered them to bring those 2 to him. Moon and Sigma carried 1 person each and flew toward the spaceplane. Ghost Butterfly 17 and Swallowtail didn't resist either. Their bodies hadn't fully recovered yet, and their best option was to follow Celine's group. At the very least, they would be able to survive. Once everyone was present, the spaceplane flew away from the hunting planet. Carrie and the others couldn't help but feel sorry for the animals that they hadn't killed yet. At this point, Shueqiu had returned to his harmless self, and was rolling around with the Miantuan without the slightest hint of nervousness. 2 slow-witted bastards. Only after the spaceplane left the planet and entered the starship did everyone finally relax. The soreness in their muscles intensified. However, Carrie and the others ignored the soreness and ran to the spaceplane's transport container to clean up the meat and the alien beast's horns. Meanwhile, Sigma and Moon went to Swallowtail's little orchard to deal with the seeds. Celine called Yudi and brought Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail to a meeting room on the starship. Celine looked at Guidai Shichi and Swallowtail and asked, "Tell me, which side are they on?" "You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.